Chapter 390. The mound that trapped Xiaofan turned back into a small black lump of soil and fell down. Now that Tianjichin was dead, the spirit-trapping formation also lost its effect. Mo Chenga sighed, walked over to pick up the small lump of soil, patted Xiaofan's head, and threw it a medicinal pill. You can't eat it anymore. Eat this. Xiaofan swallowed the medicinal pill and asked, Master, did I lose? Your cultivation level is still low, so it's normal that you can't beat him. Mo Chenga stroked its head. Xiaohua was too naughty. Feifei was now the king, so Xiaofan was the most obedient. After comforting Xiaofan, Mo Chenga looked up. Tiancan was looking at Ling Yunhe thoughtfully with his arms crossed. Ling Yunhe stood silently in front of Tianjichin and Ling Yunfei's bodies without moving. Mo Chenga couldn't help but sneer. Ling Yunfei and Tianjichin were really not smart. They had such a close relationship with Ling Yunhe, but they actually looked down on him. Even though half of his body was splashed with black water and he was injured, he was Ling Yunhe, a top cultivator of Jian sect. How could he be trapped by a small spirit-trapping formation and wait for death? She intervened because she knew Ling Yunhe wouldn't lose the ability to fight back. That being the case, she did him a favor. These two people were probably used to being protected by Ling Yunhe, so they ignored this problem. After the spirit-trapping formation was used, it would consume the spiritual aura of the cultivator who set it. Tianjichin used two spirit-trapping formations and also used formations to fight Tiancan and Xiaofan. How could he maintain the perfect effect? Before long, Ling Yunhe was able to get out of the formation. Before this, his dantian and meridians had long been protected by Mo Chenga's medicinal pills. That black water corroded half of his body. Although it was a serious injury, it was only an external injury. It didn't substantially affect his strength. Tianjichin and Ling Yunfei thought he was so seriously injured that he could be killed easily, so they attacked him rashly. After standing for a while, Ling Yunhe's eyes finally moved. He gathered some spiritual aura in his palm and pressed it on the wound. The blood flow slowly stopped. Then he turned to Tiancan and Mo Chenga, nodded and said faintly, Fellow Taoists, thank you. Tiancan was the first to speak. He chuckled and said, Brother Ling, don't you think it's too early to thank me? How do you know that fellow Taoist Qin and I won't attack you? Ling Yunhe smiled bitterly and shook his head. Fellow Taoist, if that's the case, why did you help me back then? Wouldn't it be better to wait for both of us to suffer? Tiancan stopped smiling and looked at Ling Yunhe. You are a nice person, but your eyesight is not good. Ling Yunhe wanted to laugh, but in the end he didn't. He lowered his head and looked at the corpses of Tianjichin and Ling Yunfei in silence for a long time. An hour ago these were his most trusted brothers and closest friends. Now they were two corpses. Moreover, they were killed by him. Do you regret it? Of course not. Since they had chosen to betray, this was the consequence they had to bear. Although he valued friendship, he wouldn't be soft-hearted to betrayers. Fellow Taoists. Ling Yunhe's eyes gradually became firm. He slowly raised his hand and bowed slightly. His injuries were a bit serious, so he had to be gentle. I'll always remember your great kindness. Please meet me in the Ling clan's mansion in 3 months. I'll certainly repay you then. Mo Chenga and Tiancan didn't say anything. Ling Yunhe's expression was very calm, but between his eyebrows, there was a kind of speechless sadness and deep fatigue. Although they had indeed lent a helping hand for the sake of certain benefits, the two of them chose to remain silent at this time. Ling Yunhe didn't wait for them to answer. He took the Qinghuan bags from Tianjichin and Ling Yunfei's bodies and threw them to them. His tone was still indifferent. Now that this is over, I'll go back to heal my injuries. See you in 3 months. After he finished speaking, he put away their corpses, shook his sleeves, stepped on his flying sword, and slowly flew to the exit of the valley. Fellow Taoist Ling. Ling Yunhe stopped but didn't look back. Fellow Taoist Qin, is there anything else? Mo Chenga sighed softly. She picked up the 2 flying swords on the ground and threw them to him. These are your younger brother's natal magic weapons. They're useless to us. Fellow Taoist Ling, you can keep them as a memento. Ling Yunhe held the pair of flying swords and was speechless. After losing their master, they had already lost their luster and became useless. He took a deep breath and put them away. Thank you. Then he put the 2 flying swords into his sleeves and quickly disappeared into the forest. ****, fellow Taoist Tiancan, we should divide the loot. Tiancan was startled to hear Mo Chenga's voice. Mo Chenga crossed her arms, tilted her head and stared at him. Tiancan felt scared and stared at her. Fellow Taoist Qin, why are you looking at me like that? Although you're young and beautiful, I've never been interested in women. Emo Chenga nodded. Yes, of course you're not interested in women. Maybe you're a little interested in men. Tian Can's eyes widened. What did you say? Emo Chenga looked like she was smiling. She walked around him twice then said, Do you really think I can't recognize you? Fellow Taoist Nye? After a while Tian Can sighed. He took off his bamboo hat, pulled off his mask and wiped his face, revealing Nye Wuxiang's delicate and pretty face. When did you find me? She asked in her own voice. Seeing the face she expected, Emo Chenga smiled. You underestimate how familiar I am with you. Nye Wuxiang was stunned. What do you mean? Emo Chenga said, Although your appearance, voice and weapon have changed, your behavior and fighting style all have traces of familiarity. I don't know many people in Yunzhong, so the answer to a martial cultivator who gives me a familiar feeling is too simple. Most importantly, after that conversation, her intuition told her that Tian Can was a woman, and she even had a good impression of her. Because of that, she began to pay attention to Tian Can's every move. Only then did she realize that Tian Can and Nye Wuxiang had inexplicable similarities. Tian Can was thin and small, about the same size as Nye Wuxiang. Tian Can was dressed in black, which matched Nye Wuxiang's preference. Tian Can covered his face so she couldn't see his mouth when he spoke. Nye Wuxiang was doing ventriloquism. Tian Can's weapon was a claw. Nye Wuxiang used boxing gloves, but when Emo Chenga met her for the first time more than 60 years ago, she used a claw. With so many suspicious points added together, the answer was obvious. Something flashed in Nye Wuxiang's eyes, but in the end, she laughed in a low voice. I really didn't expect someone would remember me. After a moment of silence, Emo Chenga asked, Did you get rid of the devil aura in your body? Nye Wuxiang looked up at her and smiled. I thought the first question you'd ask me would be how I advanced to the middle stage so quickly. Emo Chenga nodded. If you don't mind, you can tell me one by one. You're really impolite. Nye Wuxiang wanted to get angry, but in the end she just shook her head and laughed. She looked around then raised her chin. Let's talk after we get out. This place really isn't a good place to stay for a long time. Although they were already out of the dangerous inner valley, the outer valley was still full of spiritual aura. If they didn't get out as soon as possible, it would be difficult if they encountered some troublesome things again. Emo Chenga agreed. Okay. The two of them put away their things. Nye Wuxiang restored her disguise and left the valley together. In such a short time, Ling Yunhe had already disappeared without a trace. The big tree they entered the valley from had traces of a restriction being broken, so presumably he'd left safely. He hadn't left for long, but the exit was still there. Emo Chenga and Nye Wuxiang didn't need to break another restriction, so they could directly leave through the exit of the restriction he broke. The two of them talked about where they were going. Both said they didn't have a specific goal, so they simply went to Descending Star City together. On the way, the two of them talked about what happened after they parted. Emo Chenga was very surprised that Nye Wuxiang advanced to the middle stage in just 1 year. When they parted, Nye Wuxiang still hadn't escaped from North Pole Island. Even if she didn't encounter any accidents on the way and directly found a suitable place for closed-door meditation, it would have only been a whole year since then. Logically speaking, this amount of time wasn't enough for a cultivator to advance. It only took Emo Chenga 15 years to advance from the early stage to the middle stage, but her fated chances were different. She had long cultivated to the peak of the early stage of the core formation realm. She needed about 2 years to prepare to advance and stabilize her realm. Nye Wuxiang answered this question. She didn't understand martial cultivation. It was harder for martial cultivators to advance than it was for ordinary cultivators, but the process of advancement was a bit simpler. During their daily cultivation, they condensed spiritual aura through body tempering and other methods. Therefore, they only needed to condense the spiritual aura they usually condensed into their gold cores in order to advance. Before this, the condensation of her spiritual aura had long reached the requirements for advancement, but she never had the time to enter closed-door meditation. After stealing a treasure from Tianyan sect, she blended into the group of cultivators going out to sea. Later, she randomly found a small island in the inland sea to avoid Tianyan sect's pursuit and conveniently entered closed-door meditation to advance. With that treasure temporarily suppressing the primordial devil aura in her body, her advancement was very smooth. In less than half a year, she broke out of her closed-door meditation, crossed the sea, and arrived in Eastern Tang. After arriving in Eastern Tang, she changed her name to Tian Can and wandered around aimlessly. By chance she met Ling Yunhe. Seeing her outstanding strength, Ling Yunhe invited her to Carefree Valley. At this point, Nye Wuxiang was still worried about the primordial devil aura in her body. Although Tianyin Sec's treasure could temporarily suppress her devil aura, it couldn't be eradicated. Therefore she took this opportunity to make a request to Ling Yunhe. Ling Yunhe agreed, so she joined the group for the trip to Carefree Valley. To her surprise, she actually saw Mo Tiange again in this group. She knew Mo Tiange wasn't weak. When they first met, Mo Tiange's cultivation level was clearly weaker than hers. When they met in the core formation realm, they were already on par. When they met again on North Pole Island, Mo Tiange even surpassed her in one fell swoop and advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. Now that she herself had advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm, out of curiosity, she wanted to test Mo Tiange's strength. Thus, the sudden attack outside Ling Clan's mansion happened. At this point, Mo Tiange's interest was piqued. In that case, what's fellow Taoist Nie's evaluation of my strength? Nie Wuxiang was silent for a long time before she answered, if I couldn't suppress you in the beginning, I'd most likely lose. Mo Tiange had just witnessed Nie Wuxiang's real strength, so what she said was somewhat modest, but it was basically true. Nie Wuxiang's body was tyrannical. If they fought speed with speed, Mo Tiange would have to be careful. However, if they fought for a long time, that would be her strength. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange smiled and said, in that case, fellow Taoist Nie better not be my enemy. Nie Wuxiang glared at her. Why should I be your enemy? You're just looking for trouble. Chapter 391. This time, Mo Tiange found that Nie Wuxiang seemed to be different from before. Although the original Nie Wuxiang was extremely daring and acted decisively, Mo Tiange always felt her whole body was filled with a weary aura. It was as if she had no interest in everything around her, and even whether she was alive or not didn't matter to her. But this time, although she also wandered around aimlessly, she was full of enthusiasm and vitality. Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask, fellow Taoist Nie, you and I were separated for a year. Did you encounter some fated chances? Why do you seem different now that we meet again? Upon hearing what she said, Nie Wuxiang asked with great interest, what's different? Mo Tiange tilted her head and thought for a while, then said, it seems that I've begun to enjoy the pleasures of life. Nie Wuxiang was stunned. She stopped smiling and looked at Mo Tiange with deep eyes. I have to thank you for that, fellow Taoist. Mo Tiange was confused. Thank me for what? Except for taking her in for 3 days on North Pole Island, she didn't do anything to help her. And during those 3 days, nothing special happened, which was enough to change Nie Wuxiang's mind. Nie Wuxiang sighed softly, gazed into the distance and said slowly, for so many years, I've always dreamed of leaving Master's control and living a free life. But after going through so many hardships and escaping from the celestial pole to Yunzhong, I suddenly realized that I didn't know what to do. It's been more than 100 years. Everything I do is what Master wants me to do. Although I'm unwilling, I can't deny that Master gave me the meaning of living. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. What are you talking about? You're a human, not a tool. Why do you need him to give you the meaning of living? Fellow Taoist Mo, you don't understand. Nie Wuxiang shook her head and said, your master gave you freedom, so you live for yourself. But I'm not. Before I left Master, I couldn't be considered a human at all. Nie Wuxiang smiled and didn't explain further. Some things were difficult for people who hadn't experienced them to understand. Or in other words, Master was too successful. Not only did he manipulate her life, but he also suppressed her nature. Therefore, after leaving him, she felt lost and lost the meaning of living. To high-level cultivators, 100 years wasn't a very long time, but it was her entire life. Fellow Taoist Mo, Nie Wuxiang suddenly asked, why did you leave the celestial pole and come to Yunzhong? This question was rather difficult for Mo Tiange to answer. She went to Yunzhong to broaden her horizons and also to follow Mo Yaoqing's footsteps. As for which was more important, even she herself found it hard to answer. Besides, she never thought of telling anyone about Mo Yaoqing. Upon seeing the awkward expression on her face, Nie Wuxiang waved her hand and said, you don't need to answer me in detail. I know there are some things I can't tell outsiders. I'm just curious. You're a disciple of a famous school in the Celestial Pole, your cultivation is smooth, you have a master who loves his disciples as much as his life, and you've just become Taoist companions with your senior martial brother. You're at the height of your success, so why did you leave the Celestial Pole and come to Yunzhong? Nie Wuxiang had already thought about this question when the two of them reunited on North Pole Island. However, at that time they were still considered enemies, so it wasn't convenient for her to ask. Now that she had asked, it could be considered as solving the confusion that had plagued her for the past year. Upon hearing this question, Mo Chenga just looked at her with a smile. In fellow Taoist Nye's eyes, what kind of person am I? As a disciple of a famous school, my cultivation is smooth, I have a master and a Taoist companion, so I should enjoy the envious gazes of others in the celestial pole? Should I wait for others to do everything for me? Nye Wuxiang was somewhat unable to answer. Her intuition told her that Mo Chenga wasn't that kind of person. However, in the celestial pole, weren't all female cultivators with superior backgrounds like that? They didn't need to worry about their own cultivation path. Their elders and husbands would pave the way for them. Without needing Nye Wuxiang to answer, Mo Chenga already knew what she was thinking. She said, if I only enjoyed the shadow of my master and senior martial brother, even if I formed my nascent soul, I wouldn't be able to achieve the great Tao in the end. Nye Wuxiang suddenly turned to look at her, her gaze unblinking. Achieve the great Tao? Of course. Nye Wuxiang's surprised look puzzled Mo Chenga. Could it be that fellow Taoist Nye never thought about achieving the great Tao one day and ascending to become an immortal? Nye Wuxiang took a deep breath then solemnly saluted her. It wasn't until now that I realized I underestimated fellow Taoist Mo, achieving the great Tao, ascending to become an immortal. How many cultivators nowadays still thought about these things? Yes, all cultivators who set foot on the path to immortality wanted longevity. However, after the Middle Ages the world changed into mulberry fields. For more than 100,000 years, no one had ever ascended to become an immortal. Even deification realm cultivators were few and far between. Most cultivators gave up on their desire to become immortals and turned to pursue power and longevity. Because of this, there was no longer a saying that immortals and devils couldn't coexist. Whether it was immortal cultivators or devil cultivators, the goals they pursued were no longer fundamentally different. It was hard to say whether all of this was the degeneration of cultivators or the helplessness of the path to immortality. Nevertheless, those who could still persist on the path to immortality were definitely people with firm willpower and were worthy of admiration. Seeing Nye Wuxiang's solemn expression, Mo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. I'm just a core formation cultivator now. The so-called great Tao is still out of my reach and my Tao heart is only a word. Why do you have to be like this, fellow Taoist Nye? There was no smile on Nye Wuxiang's face. She said, if fellow Taoist Mo only made me feel that there's still some joy in living when we met on North Pole Island, then fellow Taoist Mo's words today made me see a whole new world. From now on I Nye Wuxiang don't be trapped in the past anymore. Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows in surprise. Fellow Taoist Nye Wuxiang looked at the distant mountain peaks and raging clouds. She felt that the world was so vast, so why did she have to abandon that free future for the past darkness? Achieving the great Tao and cultivating to become an immortal. In the past 100 years she never thought about it and didn't dare to think about it. But it was different now. She was no longer bound and could exist freely between heaven and earth. That being the case, why couldn't she pursue the true meaning of Tao? Abandon the primordial devil aura and become a real cultivator. After crossing Mount Jialing and entering northern Qilin country in the north, the vast green mountains were covered with a layer of faint black aura, devil aura. To the north of Mount Jialing was Starfall City, a devil's domain in northern Qilin country. Northern Qilin country was the territory of Yunzhong's devil cultivators. They had 3 great devil monarchs, each occupying 3 big devil's domains. In addition there were 7 small devil's domains, which were slightly smaller than the 3 big devil's domains but also had a large number of devil cultivators. Starfall City was one of the 7 small devil's domains. Nye Wuxiang said, the lord of Starfall City is a devil cultivator in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. In northern Qilin country's devil's domain, his strength is neither strong nor weak. He can be considered a character. Mo Chenga nodded to show she understood. She realized that the cultivators in Yunzhong, whether they were cultivators or devil cultivators, weren't so strict about the way they addressed each other. For example, in the Celestial Pole, Xianqing School and Jingfa sect both followed the tradition of core formation cultivators being master Taoists and nascent soul cultivators being lord Taoists. The way they addressed each other was also a symbol of their status and cultivation level. But it wasn't like this in Yunzhong. In Tao schools, many nascent soul cultivators called themselves master Taoists, but it was purely a personal preference. Among devil cultivators, there were many who called themselves devil monarchs. Among them only the 3 great devil monarchs were truly famous in Yunzhong. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga smiled faintly. She remembered devil monarch Black Moon, whom she met once in Sky Snow City. Although he was called devil monarch, he was only a core formation cultivator. Nie Wuxiang saw her expression and asked curiously, "What's so funny?" Mo Chenga asked, "Do you remember fellow Taoist Jing?" Nie Wuxiang was stunned. Her expression immediately became a bit uncomfortable. "Fellow Taoist Mo, about that matter? He didn't do anything to you in the end, right?" Mo Chenga was dumbfounded. Soon after, she realized she misunderstood and said with a smile, "No, I'm not talking about that matter. I met someone in Yunzhong who looked very similar to him." Mo Chenga then told her about her encounter with Devil Monarch Black Moon. In the end, she said, "When I saw that Devil Monarch Black Moon, I remembered him." Nie Wuxiang also smiled. In fact, although that fellow Taoist Jing was a bit frivolous, he could be considered reliable. That day he knew Master's plan and fiercely resisted. If Master didn't keep him, he would have almost been killed. Mo Chenga didn't know about this matter. She was surprised. "Really? And at that time, you were already unconscious," Nie Wuxiang said. He said Qin Shoujing was one of the few people he could call a friend. Although he was dissolute, he didn't want to betray his friends. Moreover, the relationship between a man and a woman should be congenial and joyful. How could he be coerced into a dirty and improper act? After a pause, Nie Wuxiang sighed. "I originally didn't have a good impression of him, but after this matter, I think he's much more lovable than those sanctimonious people." Seeing that Mo Chenga was lost in thought and silent, Nie Wuxiang raised her eyebrows and asked, "Fellow Taoist Mo, what are you thinking about?" Mo Chenga sighed. "If that's really the case, Senior Marshal Brother Shoujing and I owe him a lot." Did he die on Demonic Mountain?" Mo Chenga shook her head. "He didn't. He also escaped the disaster on Demonic Mountain, but afterward, he had a falling out with a disciple of Venerable Swordsman Fuling of Gujin sect. If I remember correctly, Venerable Swordsman Fuling's disciple is the sect head of Gujin sect. What he did can be considered as offending the current power of Gujin sect, so he can't return to the sect." As she spoke, Mo Chenga told Nie Wuxiang about her encounter with Jing Xingji that day. At that time, Jing Xingji was injured and couldn't return to Gujin sect, so she didn't know how he was doing now. Nie Wuxiang said, "Fellow Taoist Mo, what does this matter have to do with you? Even if this matter didn't happen, could he have obtained some fated chances on Demonic Mountain? Maybe he couldn't escape the disaster on Demonic Mountain and directly died. Even if he really obtained some rare treasures from Demonic Mountain, he and Venerable Swordsman Fuling's lineage have long been enemies, so it was only a matter of time before they fell out. Moreover, he was a person with his own opinions. He's never been happy in Gujin sect, so he probably wanted to leave long ago. Why should we worry about him?" Mo Chenga was stunned and was speechless for a long time. Upon seeing this, Nie Wuxiang asked, "Did I say something wrong?" Mo Chenga sighed then nodded. "No, you're right. I was thinking too much. That fellow Taoist Jing isn't someone who needs sympathy." In fact, there was one more point Mo Chenga didn't mention. She realized that she had become more soft-hearted than before. She was actually worried about others. Could it be that because she obtained too much, her feelings were also rich? Was this a good thing or a bad thing? Chapter 392. Not long after they left Jialing Mountain, the two of them arrived at Descending Star City. This was the first time Mo Chenga came into contact with a place where devil cultivators lived. At first glance, Descending Star City didn't look any different from the cities where cultivators lived. It had the same row upon row of houses, the same never-ending stream of people, and the same streets filled with stalls. However, the entire Descending Star City was shrouded in devil aura. The closer they got to the city center, the denser the devil aura became. Mo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang used their spiritual aura to protect themselves and walked into Descending Star City. This was different from devil cultivators. Devil cultivators wouldn't feel uncomfortable in an environment full of spiritual aura. They could even use spiritual aura to cultivate. The denser the spiritual aura, the better it was for them. However, cultivators would feel uncomfortable in an environment full of devil aura. This could be traced back to the distant past era, the origin of immortals and devils. According to legend, in the distant past era, spiritual aura and devil aura existed at the same time. Spiritual aura rose while devil aura sank. However, the world was dominated by spiritual aura and devil aura wasn't much. Later on, the world changed and devil aura became even lesser. Because of this, devil cultivators had a hard time surviving in this world. In order to survive in this new world, they learned to transform spiritual aura into devil aura through cultivation techniques and other changes. Devil territory was a special existence. A large number of devil cultivators lived there, causing devil aura to gather in the surroundings. Devil territory was formed. Because devil aura wasn't much in this world, cultivators rarely encountered it. Devil aura was mainly destructive, so when they encountered devil aura, their strength would be affected. Of course, as long as the devil aura wasn't too dense, high-level cultivators could move freely as long as they had spiritual aura to protect themselves. However, devil aura was a headache for low-level cultivators. They couldn't cultivate in devil territory at all, and mortals who lived in devil territory for a long time would have their lifespans affected. Therefore, there weren't many low-level cultivators in Descending Star City. Most of the people who came and went were foundation-building cultivators, and those who did business were low-level devil cultivators. The two of them looked around but weren't interested in the things being sold here. Mo Chenga asked, "Fellow Taoist Nya, how much do you know about Descending Star City?" Nya Wuxiang looked around and said, "Nothing." Mo Chenga's forehead twitched. "Then why did you say you wanted to come?" "I had nothing to do anyway, so I just came to look around." Mo Chenga was speechless. Speaking of which, it was the same for her. Ling Yunha had said that they would meet again in 3 months, so she could only collect the remaining payment for the trip to Carefree Valley 3 months later. Since she had nothing to do during these 3 months, she wanted to find a place to pass the time. After coming out of Carefree Valley, she happened to be the closest to Descending Star City. She had never seen the demonic area before, so she wanted to come and see what was going on. Originally, he was hoping that Nya Wuxiang would know a bit more, but unexpectedly, she was also completely clueless. The two of them stared at each other for a while before Nya Wuxiang finally said tentatively, "Why don't we find a tea house first?" Mo Chenga was a bit hesitant. "Are there also tea houses in the devil domain? Why don't we just ask?" Nya Wuxiang then pulled a low-level devil cultivator over. "Fellow Taoist, how do I get to Starfall City's tea house?" This devil cultivator's cultivation level was only in the 5th or 6th layer of the aura refining realm. When he was pulled by Mo Chenga and realized that they were two cultivators with unfathomable cultivation levels, he was startled and stammered, "There. Over there." Nya Wuxiang loosened her grip then shrugged at Mo Chenga. "See, there are still some." A year ago, Mo Chenga found it hard to imagine that Nya Wuxiang would be like this. It was even harder to imagine that the two of them would be together like this. If they were no longer enemies after their encounter on North Pole Island, then their trip to Carefree Valley this time could be considered a little more like a friend. After walking along the street for a while and listening to the rising and falling sounds of hawking, Mo Chenga absent-mindedly felt as if she had returned to the celestial pole. When she was at Xianxing School, Luo Fengxue would occasionally invite her to take a walk outside to relax and chat. However, ever since her cultivation level gradually increased and Luo Fengxue became increasingly busy because she was in charge of the Steward's Hall on Sweet Dew Peak, these kinds of opportunities became increasingly rare. During the 2 years they lived with Qin Shi, they were busy with countless things, so they didn't have this kind of mood. At this very moment, Mo Chenga couldn't help but smile as she experienced this leisurely contentment. After leaving Carefree Valley, she realized that she seemed to have become soft-hearted. She used to be scared, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt this wasn't a bad thing. When she was only a foundation building or even a small aura refining cultivator, she didn't dare to be soft-hearted because she was still too weak. If she was soft-hearted, it would easily affect her judgment and cause her to make mistakes. The result would very likely be a tragic death. Therefore, she could only clench her teeth and walk forward vigilantly but calmly. But now it was different. Even if she was facing a nascent soul cultivator, she wasn't someone who could only wait helplessly for death. She was no longer the Mo Chenga who could only survive by being cautious. In other words, she already possessed a certain amount of power, so she had the capital to be soft-hearted. Think about it. A small cultivator who carefully walked the world and struggled to cultivate, and a core formation cultivator who had a divine ability and was no longer at the mercy of others. Which one of them would be so easily soft-hearted? Perhaps most people would take it for granted that the small cultivator should be more soft-hearted, but in fact, it was usually the core formation cultivators who were more easily soft-hearted. This was because most of those soft-hearted small cultivators had already disappeared on the bumpy road to immortality. As for those core formation cultivators, they had long trained their judgment in their long cultivation lives. They only needed a split second to determine whether a matter was harmful or not. If it wasn't necessary, they could be a bit more soft-hearted because they had enough power and weren't afraid of the backlash. Therefore, from a certain point of view, this world was upside down. Only when one had power would they have the qualifications to be soft-hearted. Mo Chenga asked herself, Could she determine whether a person or a matter would be harmful to her in a split second and then make the most appropriate handling of it? The answer was yes. In her long cultivation life, self-protection had already become a kind of instinct. Since she could, what was wrong with her being a bit more soft-hearted? But from another perspective, this wasn't a bad thing. In the aura refining realm, cultivators had to gather spiritual aura to transform their bodies. In the foundation building realm, they learned how to use spiritual aura and truly stepped into the gate of cultivation. From the core formation realm onward, they had to come into contact with the origin of spiritual aura and explore the true meaning of immortality. In the nascent soul realm, they had to comprehend the heavenly Tao. The more they comprehended, the more powerful their divine abilities would be. Because of that, after they reached the core formation realm, they originally had to put more emotions into their understanding of life. In order to cultivate one's mental state to be stronger, one had to understand more about one's heart. Therefore, whether it was Taoist, Buddhist, or Confucian schools, they all had the saying, "The Grand Master forgets emotions. Those who had emotions were ruthless." What are you thinking about? Nie Wuxiang's ear-piercing voice rang in her ears. Emo Chenga regained her train of thought from her meditation. She frowned then said, "Your voice is really unpleasant to the ears." Her original voice was only a bit hoarse and dull, but the disguised voice this time was really too unpleasant to the ears. It was as if her throat had already become a sieve, piercing and leaking air everywhere. Nie Wuxiang let out a low chuckle and said, "There's no other way. If I don't do this, how can I conceal my accent?" Emo Chenga rolled her eyes. "You're just looking for trouble. In such a big place like Yunzhong, who knows what kind of person Nie Wuxiang is? It's not a big deal for you to appear with your original appearance, right?" Nie Wuxiang said, "I stole Tianyan's sex treasure. If I'm discovered, that's indeed a problem, but there's no need to make yourself look like this, right? Do you think it's easy to change your appearance?" Nie Wuxiang cast a sidelong glance at her. "Why don't you give it a try? I didn't steal other people's sex treasure, so why would I need it?" Emo Chenga thought for a moment then said, "But I can indeed give it a try." Nie Wuxiang was just about to ask further when the two of them saw the tall tea flag in Starfall City. The two of them didn't hide their cultivation levels, so they were warmly received by the tea house waiter. Cultivation level represented strength, and strength represented wealth. If they could satisfy a high-level cultivator, even a casual tip from them would be a rare income for a low-level cultivator. The two of them didn't plan to make friends with cultivators in the same realm as them, so they left after asking the tea house waiter some questions. The waiter said there were inns in the devil domain specifically for cultivators to stay in, so they only needed to pay attention to the signs outside. The two of them walked around the area and soon found the inn the waiter mentioned. Outside the inn, there was a small flag with a white cloud painted on it. As soon as they stepped into the inn, someone immediately came to greet them. "Seniors, are you looking for a place to stay?" Emo Chenga raised her eyebrows. The person who received them was actually a low-level cultivator, not a devil cultivator. She glanced around. This inn was quite big and didn't have many people. Most of the people inside were in the foundation building realm. This inn seemed to be of high standard and mostly served high-level cultivators. Emo Chenga glanced at Nie Wuxiang. Seeing that she was satisfied, she said, "Not bad. Do you have a quiet place here?" "Yes. The low-level cultivator who received them said with a smile, "Our inn specializes in receiving high-level cultivators like seniors. We can even rent an immortal's cave. May I know how long seniors want to stay? Do you want an ordinary inn room, a separate small courtyard, or an immortal's cave?" Emo Chenga looked at Nie Wuxiang. She was quite casual about this, but she didn't know whether Nie Wuxiang had any special requirements. Nie Wuxiang looked at her and said, "I want a separate small courtyard." Emo Chenga nodded. A small courtyard was indeed a good choice. They both liked peace and quiet. An ordinary inn room could only be used as a gathering place at most. There were too many people, so living there was definitely not suitable. Moreover, an immortal's cave was too troublesome. They might leave at any time, so a small courtyard was enough. Then let's ask for a quiet courtyard. We don't know how long we'll stay, so just pick a good one. The low-level cultivator smiled and said, "Okay, a superior courtyard. 2 spirit stones a day." 2 spirit stones? This price was a bit expensive. Emo Chenga raised her eyebrows. Before she could ask, the quick-witted waiter already answered with a smile, "Senior, you don't know, but our inn is for cultivators. It takes a bit of effort in the devil domain, so the price is a bit higher." Emo Chenga thought about it and accepted this explanation. She looked at Nie Wuxiang. Obviously, she also didn't care about 2 spirit stones a day, so she said, "Lead the way." The waiter respectfully made a please gesture. "Seniors, please follow me." Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang were about to follow the low-level cultivator inside when suddenly, a person covered in devil aura stepped into the inn. "Fellow Taoists who cultivate, please wait." Chapter 393. Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang stopped in astonishment when they heard the voice and sensed the devil aura surging from the other party. They turned around to look at the door. The person who called them was a middle-stage core formation devil cultivator in his 30s. He had black hair, a short beard, and an aquiline nose, which made him look shrewd and gloomy. "Fellow Taoist, are you calling us?" Mo Chinga asked when she saw this person looking at her and Ye Wuxiang. The person looked at the two of them carefully, then said, "Yes. Fellow Taoists, my surname is Liang. I'm a ceremonial elder in Descending Star City." Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang cupped their fists at the same time. "So it's Elder Liang." Seeing that the two of them were calm and neither servile nor overbearing, Elder Liang knew they were knowledgeable people, so he smiled and returned their greetings. "Fellow Taoists, you don't have to be so polite. May I know how I should address you?" Mo Chinga held back her laughter. To be honest, it was fine if this Elder Liang didn't smile, but he looked a bit gloomy. Once he smiled, people would immediately feel he was up to no good. "I'm Qin Wei." Although she was laughing inwardly, she still maintained impeccable politeness on the surface. Nye Wuxiang just cupped her fists and said faintly, "Teng." "Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Qin and fellow Taoist Tian Can." Elder Liang went straight to the point. "May I know why you've come to Descending Star City?" Mo Chinga glanced at Nye Wuxiang. Nye Wuxiang wasn't interested in dealing with people, so she raised her chin and signaled Mo Chinga to answer. Mo Chinga said, "We're just passing by and just strolling around." "I see." Elder Liang's gaze shifted back and forth between the two of them as if he was weighing whether she was telling the truth or not. In the next moment he still had a smile on his face. "Fellow Taoists, your cultivation levels are outstanding. It's really rare for you to come to Descending Star City. I wonder if I can have the honor of inviting you to the City Lord's mansion as guests?" Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang glanced at each other in surprise. They were both people who often traveled outside and were experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time they encountered this kind of situation. It was rare for cultivators to be friendly with each other unless they wanted to befriend each other. They had only just arrived at Starfall Star, but Elder Liang had coincidentally come to invite them. Was it an accident, or did he have some ulterior motive? With that thought in mind, Mo Chinga bluntly asked, "May I ask Elder Liang what's the matter? If it's just a mutual acquaintance, why don't we wait for fellow Taoist Tian Can and I to settle down before going to the City Lord's mansion?" "There's no need for that." Elder Liang's eyes flickered as he looked around. As soon as he arrived, the attendant had already stood to the side. Now the attendants of the inn could only watch from afar, not daring to come forward. He said, "I won't hide it from you too. This is an order from the city governor. In the near future, all cultivators above the completion level who appear in Fallen Star must come to the city governor's palace." Mo Chinga was dumbfounded. Elder Liang had a very solemn expression on his face. Although he didn't intend to force her, his attitude was very firm, so she said, "Elder Liang, please forgive us. We're all core formation cultivators. If we don't have a clear reason, it's inconvenient for us to go with Elder Liang." Her words were very clear. How could core formation cultivators be easily pressured by force? The City Lord of Fallen Star City was only an early-stage nascent soul devil cultivator. Although they weren't as good as him, they wouldn't be at the mercy of others. If this Elder Liang explained things properly, they would have to give the City Lord a bit of face since they were in Fallen Star City. However, if he didn't say anything and only used force to invite them, they wouldn't obediently let themselves be tied up. Elder Liang was obviously used to this. He didn't look embarrassed at all. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, you don't need to be nervous. It's just that the City Lord has something to ask of you. As for what it is, it's inconvenient for me to tell you now. If fellow Taoists don't mind, we can talk as we walk." This Elder Liang's attitude was too calm. It really didn't seem like he was plotting anything. Mo Chinga and Nye Wuxiang glanced at each other. Nye Wuxiang said through voice transmission, "There's no harm in going and taking a look." Mo Chinga pondered for a moment, then slowly nodded. She raised her head and said to Elder Liang, "That being the case, we'll go with Elder Liang." Elder Liang smiled and said politely, "Thank you for your cooperation, fellow Taoists. Please follow me." Right after he finished speaking, Elder Liang walked out of the inn. Mo Chenga stared at his back, then waved at the waiter who served them before. Is this really your ceremonial elder? Were there any other core formation cultivators recently invited into the City Lord's mansion? The waiter hesitated for a moment before replying respectfully, Senior, this is not something that normal cultivators like us who live in Descending Star City can know. Furthermore, core formation stage seniors rarely appear in the world. Our inn has only received 2 core formation stage seniors recently. However, this is indeed the ceremonial elder of Fallen Star City. This is true. Right after he finished speaking, a foundation building cultivator dressed like a shopkeeper said, Seniors, I do know a little about this matter. Yesterday, a core formation senior was invited to the City Lord's mansion from this tea house. Oh, thank you, Mo Chenga said to them, then turned around and left. Nye Wuxiang also followed her. Fellow Taoist Nye, Mo Chenga said through voice transmission, can you use your divine sense to check if there aren't any core formation cultivators in the city? After a while, Nye Wuxiang replied, correct. Aside from you, me, and that elder Liang, there's only 1 core formation cultivator active in the east of the city. Mo Chenga nodded to show she understood. The City Lord of Fallen Star City was an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be so few core formation cultivators in Fallen Star City. It seemed Elder Liang was right. All core formation cultivators were invited to the City Lord's mansion. There were restrictions there, so they couldn't probe them. When the 2 of them walked out of the inn, Elder Liang was waiting not far away. When he saw them coming out, he greeted them with a smile. Fellow Taoists, please. Mo Chenga nodded with a smile, then followed Elder Liang with Nye Wuxiang. With Elder Liang leading the way, the surrounding low-level cultivators all made way, giving the 3 of them a lot of space. Elder Liang. Nye Wuxiang lifted her bamboo hat and said, can you tell us the purpose of the City Lord's invitation? Elder Liang casually cast a soundproof barrier, then said, Fellow Taoists, you didn't come to Fallen Star City for anything important, did you? Mo Chenga and Nye Wuxiang had already answered this question, but under the circumstances at that time, it was very likely they just said it casually, so Elder Liang asked again cautiously. Mo Chenga said, correct. Fellow Taoist Tiancan and I were just passing by this place, so we decided to take a stroll and broaden our horizons. Elder Liang nodded with a smile. That's good. He paused for a moment, then said, I won't hide it from you too. 2 months ago, the City Lord invited all the core formation fellow Taoists who appeared in Fallen Star City to the City Lord's mansion for one thing. Based on the scale of Descending Star City, 2 months should be enough for them to hire more than 10 core-bearing cultivators, right? In addition to the core formation cultivators in the city, there should be at least 20 to 30 of them. What kind of matter would require so many core formation cultivators? I can't reveal the reason for this matter in advance without the City Lord's permission. However, that's the gist of the matter. Of course, fellow Taoists don't need to worry. The City Lord will definitely pay you for this matter. Elder Liang, Nye Wuxiang suddenly said coldly, can't we refuse this matter? Elder Liang was stunned. He cautiously glanced at Nye Wuxiang, then said, I don't know about this. I'm only responsible for inviting all the core formation fellow Taoists who appeared in Fallen Star City to the City Lord's mansion. The City Lord will explain this matter to you. However, up until now no one has refused. Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. This matter was a bit unusual. Within 2 months, all the core formation cultivators who appeared in Fallen Star City were invited, but not a single one refused? Most core formation cultivators appeared in the mortal world because they had something to do. There were very few core formation cultivators like Mo Chenga and Nye Wuxiang who wandered around. Why didn't those people refuse when they had something to do? Was it simply because the person who invited them was a nascent soul cultivator? Offending a nascent soul cultivator was indeed something core formation cultivators had to avoid. However, how many core formation cultivators had extraordinary identities and strong backgrounds? The influence of Fallen Star City could only be considered SOSO in the devil domain of the Northern Chilan Kingdom. It wasn't worthwhile for them to force themselves just to avoid offending the City Lord, right? Based on this, either the reward was too shocking for those core formation cultivators to refuse, or the City Lord of Fallen Star City played some tricks and they couldn't refuse. Which one was it? Mo Chenga looked at Nye Wuxiang, and Nye Wuxiang was also looking at her. Fellow Taoist Mo, what do you think? Nye Wuxiang sent her a secret message. If it was the former, it wouldn't be a problem, but if it was the latter, rashly going to the City Lord's mansion wasn't a good choice. Once they entered someone else's territory, they'd have to let them make the decisions. But if they didn't go, they couldn't do anything. Although Elder Liang's attitude wasn't bad, he was very firm. They were already in Fallen Star City. If they didn't go now, the city lord would personally make a move, which would be troublesome for them. Mo Chinga pondered for a while, then said, Elder Liang, what if I don't want to see the city lord? What would you do? Elder Liang smiled. This isn't the first time I've answered this question. Fellow Taoist Qin, there were several core formation fellow Taoists who said they had matters to attend to and couldn't go. I really couldn't persuade them, so the city lord personally went to see them. Later on, those fellow Taoists all agreed. Elder Liang only said a few simple words, but Mo Chinga understood a lot from his words. Those core formation cultivators were very likely to unyieldingly express they didn't want to go to the city lord's mansion, and they might even forcibly leave. As for the persuasion Elder Liang mentioned, it was very likely he'd use force to force them to go. If they couldn't defeat them, he'd report it to the city lord. As for whether this city lord of Fallen Star City would use force or benefits to make them agree after he personally went to see them, Mo Chinga didn't know. This made Mo Chinga even more uncertain. Should she go or not? If she didn't go, she'd most likely have to fight, and she'd most likely have to face nascent soul cultivators. If she went, it would be hard to predict whether it would be a blessing or a curse. Fellow Taoist Mo, let's go and take a look. Upon hearing her voice, Mo Chinga turned around. Nia Wuxiang winked at her, then said through voice transmission, You know about my concealment method. I think you also have a secret escape method, right? Chapter 394. In the end, Mo Chinga accepted Nia Wuxiang's proposal. She was right. Although she didn't know what happened, she was sure those core formation cultivators' lives were in no danger. Since their lives weren't in danger, what was there for her to be afraid of? Nia Wuxiang once said her concealment technique was extraordinary. Even nascent soul cultivators would have a hard time detecting her. As for herself, she had the virtual sky world. As long as she could use spiritual aura and didn't get corroded by the dead aura like what happened to Ren Yufeng, escaping wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, she still had Mo Yaoqing's land shrinking ruler that she hadn't used yet. With that thought in mind, the two of them calmly followed Elder Liang. Elder Liang was very happy to see them. Both of them were in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If they were really unwilling, he'd be in trouble this time. He was too incompetent as an elder to always let the Castellan take action. After walking for a while, the three of them arrived at a mansion in the city. This mansion occupied a very large area and occupied the center of Starfall City where the devil aura was the densest. The whole mansion was shrouded in a devil aura restriction. If they rashly probed it with their divine sense, they'd be injured by the restriction. Elder Liang. Upon seeing Elder Liang approaching with the two of them, the cultivators guarding the mansion saluted respectfully. Elder Liang nodded faintly and said, Open the restriction. Yes. The guard respectfully used his identity tablet to open the restriction of the mansion. Mo Chinga glanced at the mansion. The guards of the mansion were led by 2 foundation building cultivators and a team of 9th and 10th layer aura refining cultivators. One team guarded the gate while the other patrolled nearby. Considering the size of the mansion, 2 teams of guards were considered few. However, the mansion's power still came from the nascent soul Castellan, so the guards weren't very important. However, it seemed this Castellan wasn't ostentatious and should be a practical person. Elder Liang invited the two of them into the mansion. They walked through corridors and halls until they reached the back garden. Mo Chinga was a bit surprised. This Castellan's way of treating guests was indeed a bit casual. However, when she thought the other party was a nascent soul cultivator, she felt relieved. Their cultivation levels weren't worthy of this Castellan's courtesy. When they arrived at the back garden, Elder Liang directly led them into a small parlor and said, Fellow Taoists, please wait here for a moment. The city lord will be here soon. Mo Chinga nodded to show she understood. Elder Liang smiled and invited the two of them to take a seat. After sending out a message talisman, he sat beside them and chatted with them. Mo Chinga and Nia Wuxiang's minds weren't on this either. They casually agreed while waiting for the master of Descent Star City to arrive. After a while, a strong aura approached them from afar, heading towards the flower hall. At the same time, a voice rang in their ears, Welcome to Descending Star City, my friends. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure quickly flashed into the small reception hall and landed on the main seat. This kind of aura was undoubtedly that of a nascent soul cultivator. The three of them stood up and Elder Liang rushed forward to greet him. Subordinate greets the city lord. Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang also stood up to show their respect to nascent soul cultivators. When they looked up, they saw a young man dressed in luxurious clothes sitting on the main seat. This young man was very young. He looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old. He wasn't tall and he was very skinny, unlike an adult man. Even if he was slightly shorter, his shoulders would still be broad and sturdy. This made his luxurious clothes look like a burden piled on his body, and it didn't feel like it was fitting at all. His left eye was covered with a blindfold and he had only one eye. Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang were both experienced and knowledgeable people. In an instant, they finished examining the city lord of Descending Star City, but their faces didn't show any signs of surprise. Although this city lord looked young, his voice carried a sense of seniority. Furthermore, there were traces of time on his eyebrows and hands. His actual age was definitely not young anymore. "Greetings, city lord." Mo Chinga slightly lowered her eyebrows and cupped her hands to greet him. Then she immediately asked, "Why did you order Elder Liang to invite us to the city lord's mansion?" The young man's single eye was carefully examining the two of them. At that moment he waved his hand, signaling Elder Liang to leave. He then invited them to sit down again before saying, "Although your cultivation levels are only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, your spiritual aura is thick and condensed. Presumably your strength is extraordinary." "City Lord, you're being too polite." Mo Chinga cautiously looked at him. This young man was different from Elder Liang. Elder Liang's devil aura was so thick that it was visible to the naked eye, but this young man's devil aura was so faint that it was almost undetectable. After the young man finished examining them, he pointed at them and asked with a smile, "This is Qin Wei, little friend Qin, and this is little friend Tianqian. Am I right?" Elder Liang had already informed them of their identities through a summoning talisman. Their appearances and names were exactly the same, so this young man naturally recognized them correctly. Mo Chinga smiled slightly. Ye Wuxiang didn't like to talk, so she communicated on her behalf. "Yes." The young man nodded and introduced himself. "I'm Starfall City's City Lord. My surname is Mei and my name is Foam." "So it's City Lord Mei. I've heard a lot about you." Mo Chinga's expression was completely calm. Upon seeing this, City Lord Mei laughed and said, "All right, let's not talk about these empty courtesies. Since little friend Qin asked me why I invited you, you must be an impatient person. How about we get straight to the point?" Mo Chinga and Ye Wuxiang naturally didn't have any objections. They were both impatient people who treated empty courtesies, so they immediately nodded and said, "City Lord Mei, please speak." City Lord Mei said with a smile, "Presumably that elder of mine has already mentioned it to you too, right? The matter is simple. I want to ask you two to help me with something. If you succeed, I'll reward you handsomely." Elder Liang had already mentioned this before. Mo Chinga said, "This? Juniors don't understand. With City Lord Mei's cultivation level and the elders of Starfall City, your strength is quite extraordinary. What kind of matter do you need help from outsiders like us? Even if you want to help, wouldn't City Lord Mei asking some nascent soul seniors be more helpful than us?" City Lord Mei chuckled and said, "I don't blame little friend Qin for having such a thought. This matter is indeed puzzling. Let me put it this way. The matter I want to do doesn't require a high cultivation level, and it doesn't require too many people. What I need is to ensure our survival and have as many opportunities as possible. That's why I'm asking all the core formation cultivators who have appeared in Starfall City to help me." It didn't require a high cultivation level, so he didn't need to invite nascent soul cultivators because the price of inviting a nascent soul cultivator was also very high. It didn't require too many people, so even if he was a city lord with countless subordinates, he wouldn't be able to use them. Mo Chinga somewhat understood. However, City Lord Mei just said it needed to ensure their survival. Could it be that this matter was very dangerous? "City Lord Mei, please tell us the truth. We can't agree to your request." City Lord Mei seemed to have a good temperament. After Mo Chinga said that, he thought for a moment then said slowly, "This matter? I'll have to explain it to you first. Little friends, in your opinion, how long is my lifespan?" This question wasn't easy to answer. Mo Chinga could see that although City Lord Mei looked like a teenager, his lifespan was more than half over. However, some cultivators didn't like it when others called them old, especially when they looked young. Mo Chinga didn't know whether City Lord Mei had this taboo or not. City Lord Mei seemed to see their dilemma and said kindly, "Little friends, please speak frankly. There's no need to worry." Mo Chinga smiled and said, "That being the case, City Lord Mei, please forgive me for speaking bluntly. The City Lord should be between 500 to 800 years old, right?" Nie Wuxiang also nodded in agreement. City Lord Mei smiled and nodded. Correct. Little friends, you have good eyes. I formed my nascent soul when I was 500 years old. It's already been 300 years since then, so I'm 800 years old. The reason why I've maintained my youthful appearance is because I mistakenly ate a longevity fruit when I was young, causing my appearance to remain at the age of 15 for hundreds of years. Longevity fruit? Mo Chinga was a bit surprised. The longevity fruit was one of the main ingredients for longevity pills. If eaten alone, it could also increase one's lifespan, but it would trigger other effects. It seemed City Lord Mei was young and ignorant that caused her to suffer. City Lord Mei heaved a long sigh and said, I've lived for 800 years. Since I was 15, I've always maintained this appearance. In the beginning, I was complacent because I thought I could save a lot of look-preserving pills compared to other people. But later, as I grew older, I realized that growing older was also a fortunate thing. When this lord was young, I once had someone I loved, but that woman rejected me in the end because of my immature appearance. Mo Chinga saw that City Lord Mei's face was full of disappointment and frustration. Presumably he was very fond of that woman in the past. 15 years old was indeed an awkward age. At this age, a man would start to understand the affairs of the heart, but he still hadn't fully grown up and couldn't be considered a man. No woman in this world would wish for their lover to remain at the age of 15 forever. At this age he still didn't have broad shoulders. Moreover, even if she maintained her youthful appearance, being with him would be like being with her younger brother. After sighing for a while, City Lord Mei continued, This matter is one of the greatest regrets of my life. Although my beloved has already turned into dust, I still can't let go of it. In the past 800 years I've tried my best to restore my appearance, but unfortunately I've never succeeded. In ancient records, there was a kind of spiritual fruit called the heavenly god fruit. This fruit wasn't too miraculous in terms of cultivation, but it could remove the poison caused by eating spiritual plants. I've been searching for it for several hundred years, but I've never seen it. It's as if this fruit has disappeared for a very long time and no longer exists in this world. However, a few days ago I made a discovery. At this point, City Lord Mei's eyes shone with hope. A few days ago I discovered a secret place on Mount Starfall. I don't know its origin, but it might be an ancient ruin. Once you enter the ruins, you'll be given a test. If you pass the test, you'll be rewarded with a heavenly god fruit. Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang were stunned. If what City Lord Mei said was true, it was no wonder that so many core formation cultivators hadn't left. This kind of secret place was hard to find. If City Lord Mei gave them the opportunity to enter, even if they couldn't obtain the heavenly god fruit, they would still have a chance to obtain other treasures. This was a rare opportunity. Chapter 395. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, it wasn't convenient for the two of them to use voice transmissions. However, this was a serious matter, so they couldn't make a decision in a short time. Both Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang remained silent as they pondered. City Lord Mei wasn't in a hurry. She just sat there and watched them with a smile. Mo Chinga pondered for a while and felt it was better to discuss this matter first. She didn't have much desire for treasures and she didn't know the ins and outs of this mysterious place. It was too risky to casually enter an ancient secret place. Who knew if there were any inside stories? As for Nie Wuxiang, she was trustworthy and very strong. If the two of them joined hands, it would be safer. With this thought in mind, she said, City Lord Mei Jr. just passed by Starfall City this time and came to take a look. I've already made an appointment with a friend to meet in a few months. This, little friend Qin, rest assured, City Lord Mei said, this matter will be over in a month at most. You can leave then. City Lord Mei, Nie Wuxiang continued to ask, what's the inside story of this secret place you mentioned? Will it be life-threatening? You can get a reward if you pass, but what if you can't? In addition, if you find the heavenly god fruit, what will you give in exchange? If you can't find it, what will you do? Mo Chinga's previous words were evasive. It seemed she didn't really want to go to this secret place, but Nie Wuxiang's series of questions showed that she was seriously considering the feasibility of entering this secret place. City Lord Mei was overjoyed and said, as long as you agree to go to this secret place, I'll do my best to help you. If you find the heavenly god fruit, I'm willing to give you a spiritual treasure in exchange. You can ask for it. If you don't, you can also choose some from my collection. As for this secret place, I can tell you the truth. This place should be a test left behind from the distant past era. Its mechanisms won't endanger your lives. Of course, if you enter with others, you must be careful of others plotting against you. Nie Wuxiang thought for a while then asked, City Lord, did you invite so many core formation fellow Taoists because this secret place is only for core formation cultivators? Moreover, each person can only enter once? Correct, City Lord Mei said. After I discovered this secret place, I already went inside to explore. I am a nascent soul cultivator, so I triggered the test of the nascent soul stage. In ancient times, the magical powers of the nascent soul cultivators were exceedingly powerful. How could the cultivators of today compare? Without a doubt I didn't pass. Later on, he ordered his subordinates to send in cultivators of various cultivation levels to explore, but all of them failed. Actually, a foundation building cultivator can also enter, and the power of the explosion won't be too strong. However, the rewards for a foundation building cultivator aren't very rich, and there's no heavenly god fruit either. I have no choice but to ask the core formation cultivators passing by descending Star City for help. Mo Chinga wrinkled her brows and asked, City Lord Mei, didn't this matter leak out? If it's an ancient mystic land, I'm sure many fellow Taoists would be willing to go. City Lord Mei hesitated for a moment before calmly replying, I've also thought about this matter. Many core formation cultivators have visited recently, and they aren't foundation establishment cultivators that can be casually dealt with. This news won't be able to be concealed for long. My descending Star City isn't big and isn't considered powerful among the 7 minor demon regions of the Northern Unicorn Kingdom. If the other demon regions or the major sects of the East Tang or South Zhou Kingdom wish to enter this secret place, I won't be able to stop them. By then it's still unknown if we can exchange for the God of Heaven fruit from their hands. That's why I have to hurry up and get my hands on the heavenly god fruit while they haven't decided yet. Mo Chinga nodded in agreement. Although the heavenly god fruit didn't have any miraculous effects, it was an ancient item after all. If it could detoxify the remaining poison in spiritual plants, those major sects would most likely want to preserve it. Little friends, City Lord Mei said, I can't let you have a look at my treasures right now, but I can guarantee that they're definitely treasures that you core formation cultivators yearn for even in your dreams. As long as you agree to enter and give it a try, even if you can't obtain the heavenly god fruit, I'll still give you some benefits. For core formation cultivators, the treasures of a nascent soul cultivator were naturally rare treasures. Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang didn't doubt this point. Junior naturally believes City Lord Mei, Nie Wuxiang said, however, it'll be very difficult to pass this secret place, right? Of course, City Lord Mei admitted, you have to be mentally prepared. This is an ancient mystic land, and the test for core formation cultivators is very difficult. You might not even be able to pass the first test. Mo Chinga was aware of this point. Before she formed her gold core, Shenqing School discovered that there was a hidden 10,000 laws of nature formation in Mount Taikang. It was similar to this mystic land and was also an ancient trial ground. City Lord Mei wasn't lying. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang exchanged glances. They saw the same message in each other's eyes. Mo Chinga tacitly understood. She turned towards City Lord Mei and said with a smile, this matter is very important. Junior has to think about it. I wonder, oh of course, City Lord Mei said, little friend, you can stay in the manor for the time being and think about it carefully. Nie Wuxiang also said, Junior too. I hope City Lord Mei can make things easier for us. Of course. City Lord Mei smiled. If the two of you have decided, I'll have someone take you to rest. What do you think? That's great. Thank you for your trouble, City Lord. City Lord Mei clapped her hands to summon a maid and ordered, take these two little friends to Fenghe Courtyard. Treat them well and make sure they're satisfied. The maid bowed. Yes, City Lord. She then respectfully saluted the two of them and said, Seniors, please follow me. Mo Chinga and Nie Wuxiang stood up, cupped their fists towards City Lord Mei and followed the maid out. A moment later, the maid led the two of them into a courtyard. The courtyard was small and exquisite. It had winding corridors, a clear pond and pink lotuses in the pond, which made it look like a beautiful pavilion. In the courtyard's small hall, there was a plaque with 4 words, Crooked Courtyard, Fenghe Courtyard. Mo Chinga thought to herself. She really couldn't tell that this City Lord Mei was actually an elegant person. Moreover, there were restrictions laid in the courtyard, which blocked the devil aura, making the small courtyard look exceptionally elegant. After leading the two of them into the courtyard, the maid said, This is Fenghe Courtyard. Both of you are seniors cultivating, so it's very suitable for you to stay here. This is the east wing and this is the west wing. Seniors can choose whichever one you want to stay in. I'll send someone to serve you later. While Mo Chenga was still looking around, Nye Wuxiang said, "There's no need to serve us. We like peace and quiet the most. If there's anything, just call us. If there's nothing, there's no need to disturb us." Yes. This request was very normal for cultivators, so the maid bent her knees and respectfully retreated. Once the maid left the courtyard, the two of them immediately took action. They checked the surroundings to see if there were any prying restrictions. Once they confirmed there were none, Mo Chenga made a slight move, laying a restriction that could block divine sense. Then she and Nye Wuxiang sat by the pond. "Fellow Taoist Nye, what do you think?" Mo Chenga asked first. She could tell Nye Wuxiang was inclined to go to the secret place, but she didn't know what she was planning. "I think we can give it a try," Nye Wuxiang said as expected. She took off her bamboo hat and pulled down her scarf to get some fresh air. Then, she suddenly asked an unrelated question. "Do you think City Lord Mei saw through my disguise?" Mo Chenga was stunned. "I don't know. He's a nascent soul cultivator, so it's not strange for him to see through you. Besides, since he didn't say anything, it means he doesn't care. What does it matter if you're pretending or not?" "You're right." Nye Wuxiang sighed and said, "I'm most afraid of meeting high-level cultivators. If they're curious, they can just sweep me with their divine sense, and I won't be able to hide any secrets. At the very least, the secret that she was a woman couldn't be concealed." Mo Chenga was distressed. If she didn't have the spirit-concealing pendant, she would be in even more danger than Nye Wuxiang. Besides, even if she had the spirit-concealing pendant, it wasn't completely foolproof. For example, Ling Yunhe and Black Moon Devil Monarch used other methods to detect that she was concealing her cultivation level. After all, there aren't many high-level cultivators. Besides, they wouldn't casually sweep around with their divine sense for no reason. Even if they found out, it had nothing to do with them, so they wouldn't say anything. "Yeah, that's good." Nye Wuxiang wiped her face, then continued with the original topic. "Why do I see that you don't seem very interested? If what City Lord Mei said is true, this is a rare opportunity." Mo Chenga smiled. "You got a lot of treasures from your master, right? Do you still need to be tempted by what City Lord Mei said?" Nye Wuxiang was stunned. She shrugged helplessly and said, "Yes, when I defected, I practically swept away all of Master's belongings outside. In any case, I've already done it. Even if I didn't take anything, he still wouldn't let me off if he caught me, so I might as well do it a bit more straightforwardly. However, the primordial devil aura in my body hasn't been resolved. This City Lord Mei is a cultivator of the devil path, so maybe there are one or two related treasures in his collection. It'd be good if I could get my hands on them." What she said made sense. Mo Chenga pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, "You're saying this kind of thing to me? Aren't you afraid I'll be greedy?" Nye Wuxiang cast a glance at her, but she didn't seem to care at all. "If it was before, I really would have been afraid, but now I'm not. You're someone with great ambitions. If you want to achieve Tao and become an immortal, you can't relax your mental state. How could you neglect your roots and pursue trifles?" She then said with a smile, "Besides, although you look smart and calm, you're actually a bit pedantic inside. If others offend you, you won't be polite, but if they're polite, you'll also be somewhat polite. To deal with people like you have to be so good that you can't let go of your feelings, right?" Mo Chenga stared at the sky, speechless. Ling Yunhe told her that, and now even Nye Wuxiang said the same thing. Was her personality that obvious? However, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was precisely because they saw through her personality that Ling Yunhe and Nye Wuxiang dared to trust her. In the cultivation world, it was quite rare to have someone you could trust. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga sighed. Alas, if you want to achieve Tao and become an immortal, you'll have more restrictions than others. Of course. Nye Wuxiang said without hesitation, "If you want more, you have to pay more. This is a very fair thing." Mo Chenga also understood this. However, judging from Nye Wuxiang's tone, she seemed to have made up her mind to walk on the path to becoming an immortal. This was actually a good thing. In the future, she would have someone to talk to about this matter with. When she was in the Celestial Pole, among the people who had a good relationship with her, Luo Fengxue regained her power, Yi Jingguan liked to fight, and although Qinshi had a firm Tao heart like her, his realm was higher than hers, so it was usually Qinshi who gave her pointers instead of discussing things with her. In fact, the so-called Tao heart will become natural once it's cultivated to a certain realm. From this aspect, it's not necessarily painful because at that time, it'll already become a person's heart. Just like you now? Nye Wuxiang asked. I've always felt that you don't seem to have the common greed of cultivators. Is it because you're restricted too much that this kind of desire will naturally disappear? About that. Chapter 396. The two of them chatted for a while, straying far from the topic. In the end, they reluctantly said they'd think about it for 2 days since this matter wasn't urgent. Then they began to divide the loot. Although they didn't get anything good from their trip to Carefree Valley, Ling Yunhai gave Tianji Qin and Ling Yunfei's Chengquan bags to them after they betrayed them and were killed at the last moment to show their gratitude. Both of them were disciples of big sects and were quite rich, so Mo Chenga and Ye Wushang benefited a lot. The two of them discussed and decided to divide spirit stones, spiritual pills, and some magic weapons and ancient books they needed. Mo Chenga naturally chose Tianji Qin. Not to mention his character, his attainments and formations were indeed extraordinary. If it weren't for the fact that he had no expertise other than formations, he would be a very difficult opponent. Unfortunately, perhaps because he was used to standing behind Ling Yunha, he didn't have any means to fight. After dividing the loot, the two of them went to study cultivation techniques and meditate. 2 days later, when they had just regained their spirits, someone asked to see them outside the courtyard. They thought it was City Lord Mei, but when they asked, it was another cultivator invited by City Lord Mei. Nye Wushang was inclined to agree to City Lord Mei's request, while Mo Chenga was indifferent. However, both of them thought it was better not to jump to conclusions. After all, they only heard about this matter from City Lord Mei and knew very little about it. Now that another cultivator came to their door, it was good. Fellow Taoists, nice to meet you. Mo Chenga blinked and said in surprise, Fellow Taoist Yong, fellow Taoist Chiu, it's you? These two people were Yong Ruyu and Chiu Qingrua, whom she met once in Sky Snow City. Yong Ruyu and Chiu Qingrua finally recognized her and looked surprised. You're fellow Taoist Qin? Mo Chenga nodded at them and said with a smile, I didn't expect we'd meet again in Starfall City so soon after we parted in Sky Snow City. Fellow Taoists and I are really fated. Exactly. Chiu Qingrua answered first and looked at Nye Wushang curiously. Fellow Taoist Qin, this is my friend. His nickname is Tian Kan, Mo Chenga introduced. With a flat attitude, Nye Wushang nodded at them and said, Nice to meet you. So it's Taoist Tian Kan. Upon hearing Mo Chenga's introduction, Chiu Qingrua looked a bit disappointed, but he concealed it very well and immediately greeted her enthusiastically. Yong Ryu's attitude, on the other hand, was much more normal. She smiled and nodded at Nye Wushang in greeting. She was neither rude nor overly enthusiastic. Mo Chenga felt both helpless and amused. This Chiu Qingrua still hadn't changed a bit. He still guarded against other women as if they were thieves. Fortunately, Nye Wushang was now dressed as a man. Otherwise, she would have definitely dragged Yong Ryu back, right? Fellow Taoist Tian Kan, I met these two Taoists once in Heavenly Snow City. This is fellow Taoist Yong and this is fellow Taoist Chiu. The two of them are cultivators from one of Eastern Tang's 5 great sects, the Dawning Pill sect. After they finished greeting each other, Mo Chenga politely invited Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingrua into the hall. Fellow Taoist Qin, what a coincidence. You also came to Descending Star City? Chiu Qingrua asked right after they sat down. Mo Chenga smiled and answered, After we parted ways that day, I happened to meet fellow Taoist Tian Kan in Heavenly Snow City. We were very happy to meet again in a foreign place, so we decided to travel together. Originally, we had some matters to take care of in the vicinity, but unexpectedly, we were invited by the city lord as soon as we entered Descending Star City. May I know what happened to the two of you? We're more or less the same, Yong Ryu said. Junior Marshall's sister and I came here to travel, so we didn't have a specific purpose. We came all the way from Heavenly Snow City to Descending Star City without thinking too much. Right after we entered Descending Star City, we were invited to the City Lord's mansion by Castellan Mei. Mo Chenga's gaze changed. That means we came to the City Lord's mansion for the same reason? That should be correct. Once she finished speaking, the four of them exchanged glances with each other. Soon after, Mo Chenga smiled and said, Fellow Taoists, after we parted ways in Sky Snow City, we met again in Starfall City. Moreover, we're also gathered together because of one matter. It can be considered fate. Moreover, we're both Tao cultivators, so we're a bit closer than other people. There are some things I have to say frankly. She paused for a moment. Seeing that Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingrua were smiling and didn't seem to have any objections, she directly asked, Fellow Taoists, what do you think about Castellan Mei's invitation? Have you agreed? Once Mo Chenga finished speaking, Chiu Qingrua immediately turned to look at Yong Ryu. Although she controlled everything, she always put Yong Ryu first when it came to official matters. Yong Ryu pondered for a while, then looked at Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang. She said, "Fellow Taoist Qin is so frank, so I can't hide it from you. Yes, Junior Marshal Sister and I have already agreed to Castellan May's request." Ye Wuxiang frowned and said, "Fellow Taoists, aren't you afraid there's more to this?" Upon hearing this question, Qiu Qingrua covered her mouth and smiled. "Fellow Taoist Tian Qin, you and fellow Taoist Qin really have a telepathic connection. Your cautiousness is really similar." The ridicule in his words was very obvious. Mo Chenga felt helpless and said sternly, "Fellow Taoist Qiu, in fact, I already have a Tao companion. Although you were just joking, please don't say such things in the future." Qiu Qingrua was a bit surprised, but soon after her expression turned serious and she solemnly saluted. "I'm sorry I offended you before. I hope fellow Taoist Qin won't take it to heart." Mo Chenga smiled and waved her hand, indicating she didn't mind. It was better to say things like this so this woman wouldn't always treat her as an imaginary enemy and try every possible way to remind her senior marshal brother if he said one or two more words to him. Usually it was fine, but when they were talking about official matters, this kind of behavior was really an eyesore. "Fellow Taoists, aren't you afraid there's more to what Castellan May said?" Nye Wuxiang asked again. Yong Ryu smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Tianqin, no matter what, Junior Marshal Sister and I are disciples of a big cultivation group. Moreover, we're both core formation cultivators. We're not foundation building disciples whose cultivation groups won't care about us even if they disappear. Although Castellan May is the lord of a city, he can't afford to offend my Danxia sect. That being the case, what's there to be afraid of?" Mo Chenga wasn't surprised by this answer. In the past few days she'd discovered that Yunzhong cultivators were a lot bolder. As for the reason, it might be because cultivators from different paths lived together and lived in harmony for tens of thousands of years. After Yong Ryu finished speaking, she looked at Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang's expressions, then continued to say, "Fellow Taoists, you still haven't made up your mind? In fact, as long as what Castellan May said is true, it'll be beneficial to us. Let's not talk about what we can obtain, but ancient secret places are really hard to find nowadays. If we can go in and take a test, it'll also be very beneficial to our strength. Maybe we'll learn some ancient divine abilities and have a sudden epiphany. At that time, our cultivation levels will advance by leaps and bounds. That'll be a very good thing." Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang were both stunned. Yes, what Yong Ryu said was absolutely correct. This was the biggest benefit. They really didn't expect that Yunzhong cultivators would actually have this kind of broad-mindedness. They could see the essence at a glance. The significance of this kind of ancient secret place wasn't to obtain any visible benefits, but rather to experience ancient divine abilities and comprehend the mysteries of heaven and earth. "What's wrong? Fellow Taoists, don't you think so?" Yong Ryu asked again, since the two of them didn't speak. Mo Chenga heaved a long sigh, then looked at Yong Ryu and said sternly, "No, what fellow Taoist Yong said is very reasonable. For cultivators like us, this is indeed the biggest benefit." Yong Ryu's expression relaxed and she said with a smile, "That being the case, why are you still hesitating?" Mo Chenga didn't answer immediately. She looked at Yong Ryu, then at Qiu Qingrua, then asked, "Why do you want me and fellow Taoist Tianqin to agree so much? Does this matter have something to do with you too?" Qiu Qingrua smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Qin, don't misunderstand. It's just that Starfall City is a devil's domain, and most of the people who come here are devil cultivators. There aren't many Tao cultivators. Fellow Taoists must have heard that this secret place is a place for training. It won't endanger your life, but if someone tries to kill you from behind, you have to be on guard." "I see." Mo Chenga nodded. "So you want us to be your companions?" Yong Ryu nodded with a smile. "Yes. Junior Marshal Sister and I originally came here with this idea, but after meeting you two, we felt we didn't need to think too much about it. Although we've only met fellow Taoist Qin once, fellow Taoist Qin is much more trustworthy than others." "I have to thank you for your trust," Mo Chenga said with a smile. "But fellow Taoist Tianqin and I don't know much about this matter, so we can't answer you for now." "That's easy." Qiu Qingrua was very enthusiastic. "Senior Marshal Brother and I have been here for several days, so we've more or less understood this matter. We can tell you too in detail." "Is that so?" This was good news. Mo Chenga said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Qiu." Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua then told them one by one. As it turned out, this kind of secret place wasn't very secretive in Yunzhong. Although there weren't many of them, most cultivation groups knew about one or two, and some of them were in their hands to train their disciples. Because of that, the core formation cultivators invited by City Lord May didn't suspect anything and stayed. They all knew this kind of secret place was hard to find. In a few days, it would be known by all cultivation groups. At that time, they would have to spend a lot of effort to enter the secret place. It would be better for them to help City Lord May's group this time. The sooner they entered the secret place, the more benefits they could obtain. As for that secret place, they also asked the core formation cultivators in Descending Star City to learn more about it. Although it was difficult to pass, the mysteries of the divine abilities inside were obvious. There were even some secret techniques of the devil path inside. For devil cultivators, this was very attractive. Because in the Middle Ages there were many cultivators and very few devil cultivators, so when an ancient secret place was discovered, it was usually cultivators who benefited the most. However, this ancient secret place actually had secret techniques of the devil path. This was really too rare. After spending most of the day explaining the matter, Yong Ryu asked again, "Fellow Taoists, this is all we've asked about. What do you think?" Mo Chenga and Nye Wuxiang glanced at each other, then said, "Fellow Taoists, this is all we've asked about. What do you think? However, I still need to discuss this matter with fellow Taoist Tian Can. I'll give the two of you an answer after some time. How about it?" Yong Ryu smiled. "Of course. Since that's the case, Junior Marshal Sister and I will take our leave first. We don't have much time, so if you two fellow Taoists have made a decision, please reply as soon as possible." Chapter 397. After Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua left, Mo Chenga and Nye Wuxiang were silent for a long time. After a while, Nye Wuxiang suddenly asked, "Do you think they're trustworthy?" Mo Chenga shook her head. "I can't say for sure. I'm not familiar with them." Nye Wuxiang nodded, stroked her chin and said, "Don't you think there's a big difference between Yunzhong and the Celestial Pole in some aspects?" Mo Chenga was also thinking about this a moment ago. "You're right. If cultivators in the Celestial Pole encountered such a good thing, they'd probably suspect this City Lord May has evil intentions, but cultivators in Yunzhong don't have that many concerns. Yes, they're not so wary of people and their way of thinking is also much simpler." Nye Wuxiang thought for a long time and sighed. "I originally thought we could give it a try, but seeing the attitude of these Yunzhong cultivators, I feel a bit uneasy." Mo Chenga pondered. "But the problem is, even if we don't agree, will this City Lord May let us go?" The two of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Although City Lord May was polite to them before, they didn't think she'd simply let them go. Even if the atmosphere in Yunzhong and the Celestial Pole were somewhat different, strength was respected. This was the unchanging iron rule of this world. They were only core formation cultivators and didn't show any background, but they made a different choice from other cultivators, so it was hard to guarantee that City Lord May wouldn't be suspicious. The two of them thought for a long time but couldn't come up with a good solution. They were rich, so the so-called benefits weren't very attractive to them. However, Nye Wuxiang wanted to find a way to eliminate primordial devil aura, while Mo Chenga was quite tempted by the mysteries of the distant past era divine power Yong Ryu mentioned. However, they were born in the Celestial Pole and had rough experiences, so they were much more vigilant toward people than cultivators in Yunzhong. They really didn't dare to trust people so easily. "Let's go." After a long time, Nye Wuxiang said after some deliberation, "If we don't go, we obviously have no way out." Mo Chenga pondered while nodding slowly. The problem now wasn't whether they should go or not, but if they didn't go they couldn't leave. They were in Descending Star City, and City Lord May was a nascent soul cultivator. Although they had nothing to fear among the core formation cultivators, they were not arrogant enough to think that they could defeat a nascent soul cultivator. Moreover, the other party had the geographical advantage. "Since we're going, are we going with those two?" Nye Wuxiang asked. Mo Chenga thought for a moment then said, "In terms of strength we're a bit stronger than them. There's really nothing to be afraid of." "Yes." Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were both in the early stage of the core formation realm. Even though they came from a big sect and were stronger than ordinary cultivators, they were still not ordinary cultivators. "Then it's decided?" Mo Chenga stared at Nye Wuxiang. Nye Wuxiang nodded. "That'll do. If that's the case, we'll have to prepare well. If we notice anything amiss, we'll leave immediately." Nye Wuxiang agreed. As long as they were out of Descending Star City, even if it was just out of the Chancellor's residence, they would have a chance to escape. With that settled, the two of them got busy. Mo Chenga went back to her room, laid a formation, then entered the virtual sky world to rest and reorganize. She prepared everything and took the 3 spiritual beasts with her. As for Nie Wuxiang, her hand was slightly injured, but it wouldn't affect her fighting too much. When the two of them finished preparing, Mo Chenga asked a maid to bring Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua over. Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tian Can. Once the two of them came in, Yong Ryu said with a smile, "Have the two of you made a decision?" "Yes." Mo Chenga smiled and invited the two of them to sit in the hall. "I've discussed it with fellow Daoist Tian Can. Since both of you think it's worth a try, we're also willing to go." "That's good." Yong Ryu looked happy and clapped her hands. "With two fellow Taoists accompanying us, we'll feel much more at ease." "Same to you." The four of them chatted for a while before Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua said goodbye and left to go back to prepare. Before leaving, Qiu Qingrua held Mo Chenga's hand very intimately and said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, it's rare for us core formation female cultivators to meet sisters in the same realm as us. What's even rarer is that we're both Dao cultivators, so we presumably have a lot of common topics to talk about. If there's a chance, let's talk more." Mo Chenga smiled and answered politely, "Fellow Daoist Qiu, if you want to talk, feel free to visit me or ask someone to send a message." Qiu Qingrua was very happy to hear her answer. He said a lot more before leaving with Yong Ryu. After watching their figures disappear, Nie Wuxiang leaned against the moon cave door with her arms crossed. She raised her chin at Mo Chenga and said with some disgust, "Why are you so polite to that woman?" "That woman?" Mo Chenga was stunned but soon smiled. "You mean Qiu Qingrua? Who else could it be?" Nie Wuxiang curled her lips. "I really don't understand. Does she really think her senior martial brother is loved by everyone? She's a cultivator, but she's acting like a secular woman, guarding against other women like a thief. That being the case, what's the point of her cultivating?" After talking for a long time, Mo Chenga imitated her and leaned against the moon cave door, staring at her with a faint smile on her face. Nie Wuxiang couldn't help but touch her face. It was nothing. She was still wearing a veil, so cultivators in the same realm as her wouldn't be able to see through her. This made Nie Wuxiang a bit nervous. "What's wrong?" Mo Chenga stroked her chin and revealed an enigmatic smile. "Why do you dislike her so much?" "Because." Nie Wuxiang took off her bamboo hat and pulled off the veil underneath, feeling a bit annoyed. "Maybe it's because she's jealous. She has such good qualifications, but she's putting her mind on this kind of unimportant thing. It's simply a waste." Mo Chenga laughed and patted her forehead. "How do you know it's a waste for her to do this?" "Anyone with eyes can see it," Nie Wuxiang said gloomily. Mo Chenga looked at the sky then said, "In fact, if you think about it from another perspective, that fellow Daoist Yong doesn't seem like a stupid person. Why does he turn a blind eye to his junior martial sister's behavior?" Nie Wuxiang was stunned. Maybe he doesn't care?" "That's possible. But he obviously doesn't dislike it." Mo Chenga spread her hands. While looking at the veins on her palm, she said, "In other words, all of Qiu Qingrua's actions are in the hands of her senior martial brother, but that Yong Ryu is completely unaware of it. If it's not because he's particularly slow, then it's because he tacitly approves of his junior martial sister's actions." "So what?" "Nothing." Mo Chenga's gaze fell on Nie Wuxiang's face. She said faintly, "It's just that this is other people's lives. They themselves don't have any opinions about it, so why should we worry about them?" Nie Wuxiang's expression gradually softened. After a long time she finally nodded. "You're right. It's their own business, it's not worthwhile for me to meddle in it." Mo Chenga smiled. "Besides, do you like that fellow Daoist Yong? What are you thinking?" Nie Wuxiang rolled her eyes at her. "I don't like Qiu Qingrua, but it has nothing to do with her man." "That's not what I meant," Mo Chenga said. Mo Chenga said, "Since both you and I don't like her, then Yong Ryu's conditions can't be considered too good. No matter what, Qiu Qingrua is a core formation female cultivator, and she's a disciple of a big cultivation group. Her cultivation level is pretty good, so presumably her aptitude isn't bad either. She's also very beautiful. If she was a bit more utilitarian, she could have found a stronger Dao companion, but she didn't. From this point of view, don't you think she's more pleasing to the eye?" Nie Wuxiang didn't say anything for a long time. Mo Chenga smiled. "There's definitely something about Qiu Qingrua that we don't like, but that doesn't mean she's wasting her life. Judging from her age, she shouldn't be more than 300 years old. Even if her aptitude is good, advancing to the core formation realm before 300 years old is still not easy. We only see her pestering her senior martial brother from time to time, but we don't see her working hard." Nie Wuxiang's expression slowly softened. After a long time, she finally nodded softly. You're right. I'm too self-righteous. Mo Chenga shook her head. We cultivators can naturally do whatever we want. Sometimes we don't need to know whether a person is good or not. Since we don't like them, we just don't get close to them. However, if we think too much, it'll be easy for us to look down on others. And? Nie Wuxiang rubbed her brows and muttered, turns out there are still so many things in this world that I don't understand. Seeing her like this, Mo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. I really can't tell you're actually several decades older than me. Judging from your appearance, you're practically ignorant about the world. Nie Wuxiang curled her lips. How could I have the chance? Mo Chenga was a bit curious when she heard this question. Right, I haven't asked you yet. How did you become Master Song Feng's disciple? Nie Wuxiang was silent for a long time. When Mo Chenga thought she wouldn't answer, she finally heard Nie Wuxiang's low and hoarse voice. My mother is his wife. Mo Chenga was stunned. She almost thought she heard wrong. She thought for a moment, then said in disbelief, So you're saying, he's actually your father? No. Nie Wuxiang's expression was cold. I'm not his child. In other words, I'm a bastard child my mother secretly gave birth to. Mo Chenga wrinkled her brows. How could someone use such words to describe me and my mother? Nie Wuxiang saw her expression and smiled self-mockingly. Master has always said that about me since I was a child. Then. Mo Chenga hesitated for a moment, then asked, What about your mother and your biological father? I don't know. They should be dead. Nie Wuxiang's tone was flat and indifferent. With Master's personality, my mother definitely wouldn't have survived after betraying him. As for that man, he also wouldn't have had a chance to live. I'm sorry, Mo Chenga said in a low voice. It's nothing. Nie Wuxiang shook her head and smiled bitterly. I should have told you that Master can't be considered a human, so he couldn't have had children. I don't know why he married my mother, but I know what kind of inhuman life my mother lived with him. So I understand very well why my mother fell in love with another man and gave birth to me, although I hate her for giving birth to me, Nie Wuxiang said faintly. Ever since I was young, Master treated me like that. He beat and scolded me at every turn, calling me a bastard child, but he also taught me to cultivate and made me work for him. I don't know what kind of mentality he had. Maybe torturing me like that gave him the thrill of revenge. Then, do you miss your mother? Nie Wuxiang was dazed for a long time. After a long time she smiled and said, Before I was 10 years old, I think. I told you Master was too successful. He completely educated me into the person he wanted me to be. I was afraid of him, hated him, but I had no choice but to rely on him. I dreamed of leaving him, but after I escaped, I almost couldn't survive. She smiled self-mockingly. Unfortunately, I still disappointed him in the end. I'll live, and I'll live better than him. Chapter 398. Mo Chenga heaved a long sigh and patted Nie Wuxiang's shoulder, speechless. She knew Nie Wuxiang must have a sad story, but she didn't expect it to be like this. The man who was supposed to be her father raised her, tortured her, and took revenge on her with his hatred for her mother. She never saw her mother, and she didn't even have the child's admiration for her. She lived for more than 100 years without freedom, hope, or even thoughts. What kind of life was that? Mo Chenga found it hard to imagine. If it was said that she once had a bit of ill feelings towards Nie Wuxiang, at this moment, it had already disappeared without a trace. It wasn't because she sympathized with her, but because even if Nie Wuxiang made her unhappy, it wasn't from her heart. She recalled Nie Wuxiang once said the reason she could advance so quickly was because Master Song Feng used primordial devil aura to open up her meridians. This primordial devil aura would flare up every once in a while, and when it flared up, she would wish she was dead. Was this also one of the methods of torture? Will your primordial devil aura flare up soon? Mo Chenga's concerned tone stunned Nie Wuxiang for a moment. She said, It hasn't flared up since I advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. I feel the spiritual aura during my advancement suppressed the primordial devil aura in my meridians, so it probably won't flare up in the near future. That's good. Nie Wuxiang looked at her, wanting to say something but hesitating. Mo Chenga asked curiously, What's wrong? Nie Wuxiang hesitated for a long time and finally asked, Do you think of me as a friend? Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows and asked with a smile, Otherwise, why would I go with you? Nie Wuxiang was silent for a long time. After a long time, Mo Chenga heard her sigh. I thought, a proud son of heaven like you wouldn't put people like me in your eyes and wouldn't understand. So that's how I look in Ye Wuxiang's eyes? Mo Chenga laughed and said, how did you know I was a proud son of heaven from the beginning? Ye Wuxiang was stunned and said, when I first saw you, you were only in the foundation building realm, but you were already Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. How could you not be? Mo Chenga sighed and said, what about before I built my foundation? I entered Xianqing school when I was 20 years old. At that time I was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. 20 years old and already at the 10th layer of Qi training. This kind of cultivation speed is considered outstanding among the elite disciples of the big sections. You're right, Mo Chenga said, but at that time I was just a trash with 5 wasted spiritual roots. I had to rely on taking medicine to cultivate. She spoke very calmly, but Ye Wuxiang was astonished. How could that be possible? If you had such aptitude, how could Lord Taoist Jinghe have accepted you as his disciple? And how could you be so young? Mo Chenga chuckled and said, my aptitude is abnormal. Before Master accepted me as his disciple, everyone, including myself, thought I had a waste spiritual root. Oh. Ye Wuxiang didn't delve too deeply into it. The cultivation world was very mysterious, and there were always a lot of strange things. Even though she was a core formation cultivator, she still couldn't completely understand them. With this thought in mind, she asked, if that's the case, how did you spend those 20 years? Mo Chenga looked down at her hands and slowly began to talk about her past. I was born in the secular world. Before I was 7 years old, I was just an ordinary village girl. She briefly recounted her experiences as a teenager and hid the parts that were inconvenient to tell others. By the time she finished, almost an hour had already passed. After listening to her, Ye Wuxiang didn't say anything for a long time. No one knew what she was thinking. After a while she finally sighed and said, no wonder. No wonder you're so different from those disciples from big cultivation groups. There are even some places that I feel are very familiar. Mo Chenga smiled. I didn't expect that the one favored by the heavens in my eyes would also have this kind of experience. Ye Wuxiang stared at her and said earnestly, I really didn't expect it. I thought your life was smooth sailing. This kind of thinking wasn't strange. People who knew her identity and saw that she had an outstanding cultivation level at such a young age would most likely have this kind of thinking. In fact, those years of wandering from place to place were only a few short years in her long life of cultivation. The longer she cultivated, the less it was worth mentioning. However, the marks left on her life were much heavier than those several decades of smooth sailing. In the past she couldn't get anything, so now that she got something, she knew how to cherish it. The important people in her life left one by one, so her heart gradually became stronger and she could calmly face those storms. Compared to those truly favored by the heavens, she experienced more life and death, separation, loss and injustice, so she could be more open-minded when facing worldly affairs. That's why I said that in places you can't see, others are also experiencing the same life as you and growing up, even if that person seems very annoying. Why do you look like that? Mo Chenga touched her face. Why do you look like that? Mo Chenga touched her face. Ye Wuxiang sighed and looked up at the sky. I really underestimated other cultivators. I always thought my experience was complicated and my understanding was different from others, but I never thought that other people's experience might be even more complicated. Mo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. I'm not as unlucky as you. Although I lost my parents when I was young, I didn't lack people who loved me. That's what you said, but I didn't think as clearly as you did. Ye Wuxiang looked down at her hand. The injury on her left hand hadn't healed yet, and there were still black traces where the black water corroded. She wrapped her wound again, clenched her fist, looked up and said, after this matter is over, I've decided to travel around and experience the life of some ordinary cultivators. What about you? Do you want to go with me? Mo Chenga pondered for a while, then said, let's talk about it later. I can't decide right now. She came to Yunzhong to travel, but she had a more important purpose. She could only be sure about this after she met Ling Yunhe. Ye Wuxiang didn't feel disappointed. She said with a smile, then let's talk about it later. At the very least, before we return to Sky Snow City, we can still do things together, right? Of course, Mo Chenga answered with a smile. Ye Wuxiang seemed to be a trustworthy person with extraordinary strength, so it would be a pleasure to be her companion. After the two of them finished talking, they asked a maid to inform City Lord Mei. In just a moment, City Lord Mei sent someone to invite them over. Little friends. City Lord Mei walked in with a smile in the same small hall where they first met. Both Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang stood up and saluted. City Lord Mei. City Lord Mei smiled. With one hand clasped behind her back, she gestured for them to sit down. This gesture was very mature, but he looked like a teenager and hadn't grown up yet, so it looked very uncoordinated. City Lord Mei sat on the host's seat and ordered someone to serve tea. She then said with a smile, "I heard you two agreed to my request. I'm very happy." Emo Chenga raised her eyebrows. "I heard there are many core formation cultivators here. Why does City Lord Mei care so much about us?" City Lord Mei looked at them, then pointed at her own head and said with a smile, "Intuition." "Intuition?" Nie Wuxiang was confused. City Lord Mei's gaze fell on her. Her attitude was amiable. "Fellow Taoist Tianqian, as a nascent soul cultivator, you naturally have some wonderful divine abilities. It's like sensing fate." Emo Chenga said with a smile, "I wonder what Lord Mei sensed? Could it be that you sensed we could pass the test?" "That's not it. Sensing isn't prophecy," City Lord Mei said with a smile. "It's just that based on your words and actions as well as my experience, I feel you two have a higher chance of passing the test this time." A nascent soul cultivator's vision was extraordinary. With just a cursory glance, she could already see that Emo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang's strength wasn't ordinary and that their chances of passing the test were slightly higher than those cultivators with ordinary strength. City Lord Mei's gaze swept over Emo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang before she said with a smile, "From what I can see, your cultivation levels are extraordinary, your spiritual treasures aren't bad, and you don't look very old. Presumably you have a master, right?" Although there was no lack of self-reliant examples in the cultivation world, having a master was certainly much easier than individual cultivators. Most individual cultivators were low-level cultivators because their aptitudes were poor and foundation-building pills were hard to come by. Very few of them could advance to the foundation-building realm, and only 1 in 10,000 could form their gold core. Their chances were much lower than those of cultivation group disciples. Because cultivation wasn't easy, individual cultivators mostly looked old and experienced, even if they looked young. However, Emo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang weren't like this. Whether it was their appearance or their bearing, they didn't look like individual cultivators at first glance. Upon hearing this question, Emo Chenga only showed a faint smile and said, "Junior indeed has a master, but it's inconvenient for me to say it. I hope Senior can forgive me." Nie Wuxiang said, "I also have a master." City Lord Mei smiled and said, "It seems you two young friends have extraordinary identities. I wasn't wrong about you." He paused for a moment then continued, "Since that's the case, I'll arrange for you two to enter the secret area to train together." "City Lord Mei," Emo Chenga asked, "can we enter the trial at any time?" City Lord Mei shook her head and said, "According to reason, the trial can be opened at any time. However, I won't hide this from you two. After discovering this secret area, I gathered the strength of all the core formation cultivators in Descending Star City and laid a restriction to ensure that this place won't be discovered by outsiders for a short period of time. Opening this restriction isn't an easy matter, so I wanted to wait until the number of core formation cultivators reached a certain number before opening it." City Lord Mei's words were reasonable, so Emo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang both nodded. "Then, when will City Lord Mei decide to open it?" City Lord Mei said, "If you two young friends decide to join, there will be more than 10 people. It can be opened in 2 or 3 days." "All right. If you decide when to open it, I'll have to ask City Lord Mei to inform me." "That's natural." City Lord Mei stood up and said, "In a moment, I'll have Elder Liang explain in detail the matters you need to pay attention to. I hope you two can prepare well in the next few days." "Of course." Since the master seemed to want to see them off, Emo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang both stood up. "That being the case, we'll take our leave first." City Lord Mei smiled and said, "Young friends, please do as you wish." The two of them cupped their hands and bowed to City Lord Mei again, then left the small hall. Under the guidance of a maid, they returned to Fenghe Courtyard. When they entered Fenghe Courtyard and confirmed that no one could spy on them, Nie Wuxiang impatiently asked, "Do you think there's a problem?" "It's hard to say." Emo Chenga wrinkled her brows. "More than 10 core formation cultivators. It's too chaotic." He also reminded us that although this trial doesn't require our lives, other people can mount sneak attacks on us. I think we have to be careful with every step we take. Chapter 399. After a while, Elder Liang indeed came to Fenghe Courtyard. He explained in detail the obstacles they might encounter in the trial, provided some information, and gave each of them a puppet-shaped magic weapon before leaving. After seeing Elder Liang off, Mo Tiange and Nye Wuxiang played with a puppet each and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, Nye Wuxiang put down the puppet in her hand and said, "They're quite well prepared." The puppet was only the size of a palm, but it was very delicate. There was a faint aura on it, but it wasn't devil aura or spiritual aura. Mo Tiange couldn't tell what it was. However, it was indeed a very good magic weapon. Elder Liang said the secret place was in Mount Starfall, and there were some poisonous creatures around it that would produce miasma. With this puppet they could avoid the miasma and save spiritual aura. Yes. Mo Tiange looked at the puppet in her hand and frowned. Are we being too sensitive? The two of them were lost in thought. In fact, there was nothing particularly unreasonable about City Lord May's behavior. It was just that they were used to thinking from the negative side, so they felt there was no reason for such a good thing to happen to them. An ancient secret place invited by a nascent soul cultivator, and there was no danger to their lives. In the celestial pole, how could such a good thing be known to outsiders? Mo Tiange felt she was being too suspicious. This was Yunzhong, not the celestial pole. How could she know this kind of thing wasn't very common in Yunzhong? Besides, weren't those dozen or so core formation cultivators unsuspicious? Judging from Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua's behavior, Mo Tiange felt there was nothing suspicious about City Lord May's behavior. After pondering for a while, Mo Tiange said, "Let's do it as we see fit. Didn't we talk to Yong Ruyu and the others? We'll act together with them. If something goes wrong, we can use their behavior as a reference." Nye Wuxiang agreed. In any case, she couldn't figure out what to do about this matter, so she'd do it this way. Several days later, a maid came to Fenghe Courtyard to invite them. This time, they didn't meet in the small hall where they met City Lord May, but in the main hall of the City Lord's mansion. Mo Tiange and Nye Wuxiang finally met other cultivators. At first glance, there were a total of 15 cultivators gathered here. 10 of them were devil cultivators. Aside from the two of them, there were righteous Dao cultivators Yongru Yuqiu and Qingrua. There was also an extremely reclusive green-robed swordsman. This person's cultivation was at the middle stage of core formation. He carried a long sword on his back that was faintly glowing. He had a very thin face and expressionlessly sat in the corner without saying a single word. Upon seeing Mo Tiange staring at that person, Qiu Qingrua approached her and whispered, "Fellow Daoist Qin, senior martial brother, and I have been in contact with this person. He seems to be very wary of outsiders and refused our proposal." "Is that so?" Mo Tiange raised her brows. There were more than a dozen cultivators, most of whom were devil cultivators, but this person didn't want to travel with Yong Ruyu. Was it because of his eccentric personality, or because he was very confident in himself? As if sensing that someone was looking at him, the man turned his head, glanced at them and nodded stiffly. He then turned his head back and continued to stare straight ahead expressionlessly. The four of them were somewhat speechless. Even Nye Wuxiang thought this person looked too aloof. It seemed he really didn't like to interact with others. "Forget it," Mo Tiange said. "Maybe this fellow Taoist really has an eccentric personality and doesn't like to interact with others." "Fellow Taoist Qin is right," Yong Ryu said. "Since he doesn't want to travel with us, there's nothing we can do." The other three nodded and withdrew their gazes. "Fellow Taoist Qin." Qiu Qingrua looked at Mo Tiange and said with a smile, "It's been several days since we last met. Is the medicinal pill you wanted to concoct done?" Mo Tiange smiled. "It's done. If fellow Taoist Qiu doesn't have anything else to do, you can help me evaluate it." Qiu Qingrua waved his hand repeatedly. "I only have a rough understanding of the Tao of pill concocting, so I don't dare to evaluate it. I just want to see it for myself." Last time when they were chatting, Qiu Qingrua accidentally learned that Mo Tiange also knew the Tao of pill concocting. He was very happy and said he also liked pill concocting very much, so he wanted to ask her for advice and so on. Although Mo Tiange didn't like to be close to people, she wouldn't refuse if others treated her kindly, so she agreed. Yong Ryu looked at the two of them with a smile and said, "Junior martial sister, you stay here with fellow Taoist Qin. I'll go to the side with fellow Taoist Tiancan and talk. We'll come back when City Lord May arrives." "Alright, senior martial brother, you can go." Qiu Qingrua smiled at him, pulled Mo Tiange's hand and sat down affectionately. Yong Ryu turned to Nye Wuxiang and said, "Fellow Taoist Tiancan, they can talk. Let's go over there and talk." Nye Wuxiang saw Mo Tiange nodding softly at her, so she said, "All right." She was now a man, so it wasn't good for her to stay here confidently. Besides, she might gain something by talking to Yong Ryu alone. Ever since he knew Mo Chenga already had a Dao companion, Qiu Qingrua's attitude became a lot more natural. Not only was he no longer guarded against her, but he also treated her very intimately. Mo Chenga felt that although Qiu Qingrua wasn't the same kind of person as her current behavior wasn't hateful. If she maintained this attitude, it wouldn't be a problem for them to befriend each other. After all, there were thousands of people in this world. How could she not befriend others just because they had different ideas? Even among friends, people had to seek common ground while reserving differences, tolerate disagreements with others, adjust their own pace, and look for things they liked about each other. Mo Chenga was startled when she realized she was thinking about this problem. She realized she seemed to have been thinking about the word friend a lot lately. Could it be that the better she got along with Nie Wuxiang, the more she felt she could have a few more friends? This wasn't impossible. In the past 100 years, she'd always been relatively unsociable. Aside from people like Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingwen who took the initiative to treat her, she never thought about making friends with others. In the past, she was busy cultivating and her cultivation level wasn't high enough, so she didn't dare to easily make friends. But now that she was a core formation cultivator, she didn't need to be like that. Fellow Daoist Qin? Upon hearing Qiu Qingrua's voice, Mo Chenga regained her train of thought. She said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I thought of a problem, so..." Qiu Qingrua showed an understanding expression. He moved closer to her and asked, "Fellow Daoist Qin, are you thinking about your husband?" Mo Chenga was stunned, but she didn't deny it. Although she wasn't thinking about Qin Shi just now, she couldn't help but think about him every few days. On Demonic Mountain, she and Qin Shi made a blood oath to each other. Ever since they parted, she could sense Qin Shi's condition was very stable, so she wasn't too worried. Presumably he was still in closed-door meditation, right? Upon seeing her expression, Qiu Qingrua covered her mouth and smiled. He then asked curiously, "I see fellow Daoist Qin's way of doing things is very natural and magnanimous. You really don't look like someone trapped in love. I wonder what kind of person your husband is to be able to make you fall in love with him?" This question startled Mo Chenga. What kind of person was Qin Shi? How could he be explained in a few words? The more she spent time with him, the more she felt he was good. But it was inconvenient for her to talk about those good qualities to outsiders. He is a very considerate person. Although he doesn't like to talk, he cares about people in his heart. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm cherished and valued. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's smiling expression, Qiu Qingrua seemed to be thinking about something. "It seems you love your husband very much." Mo Chenga looked at him, puzzled. "Fellow Daoist Qiu, how can you tell?" Qiu Qingrua said, "Your expression can't deceive anyone. Thinking about him makes you feel very happy and happy." Mo Chenga recalled her mood just now and couldn't help but smile. Indeed, even just thinking about him made her feel very happy. Moreover, when you mentioned him, you didn't talk about his cultivation level or identity first, but about his personality first. The two of you must have become Dao companions because you love each other, right? You didn't become Dao companions because of an elder's order or because of cultivation between fellow disciples. At this point, Qiu Qingrua's gaze revealed a hint of depression. This puzzled Mo Chenga. "Fellow Daoist Qiu, what you're saying? Could it be?" Qiu Qingrua forced a smile. After a while, as if unwilling, she said, "My senior martial brother and I became Dao companions because of what Master said." Mo Chenga raised her eyebrows. "But looking at you too," Qiu Qingrua sighed softly and said, "Of course, since we've become Dao companions, we naturally have feelings for each other." She looked at Mo Chenga with a complicated gaze. "In fact, I really envy you too. You're not martial brothers and sisters and you don't have any interest in it." Mo Chenga was silent for a while. Looking at Qiu Qingrua's sad expression, she finally said, "My husband is also my senior martial brother." Qiu Qingrua was stunned and surprised. "Then you too. Since we've become Dao companions, what does it matter if we're martial brothers and sisters?" She said with a smile, "Fellow disciples naturally have more opportunities to get along and develop feelings than others. Isn't this very normal?" Qiu Qingrua answered softly. The depressed expression on her face faded a little, and she looked at Mo Chenga with a smile. Perhaps because of what they said just now, she became closer to Mo Chenga. Unlike before, although they were affectionate, they still carried a hint of politeness. "By the way, where's the medicinal pill fellow Daoist mentioned? I almost forgot about the important matter." Mo Chenga smiled and took out a jade bottle from her Chengkuan bag. She said, The ingredients for this medicinal pill are too complicated. I failed several times before I succeeded in concocting this bottle. Qiu Qingrua took it, pulled out the cork and poured out a medicinal pill. This medicinal pill was bluish-green in color and carried a refreshing fragrance. One whiff of it would make people feel energized. Qiu Qingrua first observed the medicinal pill's color, then sniffed its fragrance. In the end, he dipped his finger into the powder and tasted it. In the end, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Fellow Daoish Qin, I didn't expect your pill concocting skills to be so outstanding. This medicinal pill has almost no impurities. It's indeed of the highest quality. Mo Chenga smiled modestly. I'm just very interested in pill concocting. In terms of pill concocting skills, my senior martial brother is actually more outstanding. Really? Qiu Qingrua was surprised. Your pill concocting skills are already comparable to the best concoctions masters in my Danxia sect. Fellow Daoist Qiu, you praise me too much. Qiu Qingrua tasted the powder of the medicinal pill again, then poured it back reluctantly. He asked, Fellow Daoist Qin, this medicinal pill should be used to detoxify, right? What's it called? It's called Refreshing Breeze Jade pills, Mo Tienga said. It's used to detoxify, but it can also be taken to guard against fog and the like. Really? Qiu Qingrua looked at the jade bottle in his hand, hesitated for a moment, then said, Fellow Daoist Qin, I want to exchange other things or spirit stones for your Refreshing Breeze Jade pills. What do you think? Mo Chenga muttered. This? Qiu Qingrua hastily added, Rest assured, fellow Daoist Qin. I definitely won't take advantage of you. You can name your price. That's not what I meant. Mo Chenga said, To be honest, the success rate of this medicinal pill isn't high, and the ingredients are very complicated. I only managed to concoct this one bottle. Qiu Qingrua looked at the jade bottle in his hand, sighed, and handed it back to her. That being the case, I won't force you. However, if fellow Daoist Qin succeeds, please consider it. Of course. Mo Chenga nodded with a smile. The two of them continued to discuss pill concocting for a while. Although Qiu Qingrua's pill concocting skills weren't as good as hers, they weren't weak either. Some of his pill concocting techniques were unique to Yunzhong, so Mo Chenga benefited a lot from them. Just as they were happily chatting, they suddenly sensed a powerful aura coming from afar. In an instant, all the cultivators in the room quieted down. This kind of aura. City Lord Mei must have arrived. Chapter 400. Ha 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 ha. A hoarse and somewhat shrill voice rang out. Soon after, City Lord Mei walked in from the door and cupped her hands towards everyone with a smile on her face. Young friends, I've come late. Please forgive me. City Lord Mei looked like he was 15 years old. Not only did his appearance not mature, but even his voice was still changing. This City Lord Mei looked really young, but when he moved, everyone in the room was respectful, treating him as their leader. No matter what his background was, when facing a nascent soul cultivator or a core formation cultivator, they had to maintain the corresponding courtesy. This was true everywhere, and there was no exception. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, all the core formation cultivators in the hall politely returned his greeting. Someone even answered, We wouldn't dare. City Lord Mei is a senior. We've only been waiting for a while, so how could we dare to take offense? City Lord Mei revealed a faint smile. Her gaze swept across the room, then she sat down on the master's seat. Seeing that everyone else was still standing, she said, Everyone, please sit down. Upon hearing her words, the cultivators in the hall scattered and sat down. Mo Chenga and Qiu Qingrua sat nearby. Nie Wushang and Yong Ryu also returned to their sides and sat down. The hall was completely silent. Only the faint sound of City Lord Mei drinking tea could be heard. After a while, City Lord Mei put down her teacup, faced everyone and said loudly, Young friends, I'm an impatient person. I presume everyone already knows why I've come here today. Of course. City Lord Mei were also impatient people. Please speak frankly. The one who spoke was a robust devil cultivator in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Once he spoke, the two early stage devil cultivators next to him chimed in. Mo Chenga had noticed them before. These three people should be together. The robust devil cultivator was the leader while the other two called him Big Brother. Mo Chenga didn't know whether they were real brothers or sworn brothers. These three people's words and actions were very arrogant. When everyone gathered to talk just now, they repeatedly observed the Dao cultivators in front of them. Their gazes weren't very friendly. City Lord Mei faintly smiled and said, Little friend Jean, sure, don't worry. I've invited you here. So, I'll explain everything clearly. He paused for a moment before he raised his voice and said, "Dear friends, all of you have been waiting in Descending Star City for a long time for the secret place to open. Some of you have even waited for more than a month. I would like to express my apologies for wasting your time. As of now, 15 core formation cultivators have agreed to my request and are willing to go to the hidden place. The number of people is enough. Since that's the case, I'll open the restriction of the secret place today and let all of you try it out." What do you think? Most of the cultivators present were overjoyed when they got the exact news. The only reason they were willing to stay here was because of this ancient place. Or else why would these completion-leveled cultivators waste their time? Now that he had finally achieved his goal, there was no need for him to wait any longer. City Lord May was very satisfied when he saw everyone's expressions. He said, "I'm sure all of you have heard about the specific information about the hidden place from the elders of Descending Star City. I won't say much about it. I will only say 2 things about this trip to the hidden place. First, this hidden place is an ancient trial ground. Every trial will last for a maximum of 3 days. After that, all participants will be thrown out of the hidden place. Therefore, please make the best use of your time. Second, I don't care what kind of rewards you obtain during the trial. However, if you obtain the Heavenly God fruit, please hand it over. Otherwise, I will have my ways." City Lord May's eyes were filled with power as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Prior to this, City Lord May's attitude was kind and his words were polite. He didn't have the slightest arrogance of a nascent soul cultivator. It was only now that everyone realized that he was a genuine nascent soul cultivator. Seeing that everyone was silent out of fear, City Lord May laughed and said, "My friends, there is no need to be so nervous. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. As long as you leave the hidden place, I will give you a small reward for your hard work. Even though you are all core formation cultivators and don't think much of it, it is still a small token of my appreciation." The strong demonic cultivator from before spoke first. He laughed and said, "City Lord May is too polite. You allowed us to enter the hidden place. What other request do we have?" This time, City Lord May only smiled and didn't reply. She said, "All right, my friends, I'm sure everyone is impatient. Let's not waste any more time. Let's depart." Then City Lord May stood up and led the way out of the hall. She waved her sleeve and stepped onto her flying magic treasure. Once everyone was out of the hall, they followed City Lord May and turned into rays of light that chased after them. At this moment, the idle cultivators of Descending Star City noticed a rare sight. In the sky above Descending Star City, more than 20 rays of light flew past. They were of different colors. It looked as if all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City had gathered together. Hey everyone, look at the sky." A cultivator who wanted to see the world in chaos shouted, "There are so many core formation cultivators. What are they doing?" Hearing his voice, people came out from the streets and shops to look up. That's true. There are so many people. Did all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City move out? Are they fighting? Maybe they found some treasure and are fighting with people from other demon territories. TSK, so many core formation cultivators. How impressive. Yeah, when can I also form my gold core and show off? The core formation cultivators flying in the sky naturally couldn't hear these low-level cultivators' envious words. They were focused on following City Lord May to the secret place. After leaving Descending Star City and entering Mount Xinglua, which was also known as Mount Jialing in Eastern Tang, Mo Chinga felt the devil aura was getting thinner and thinner. Gradually they went deeper into the mountain range. The fog was everywhere, so she couldn't tell where they were going. Fellow Taoist Mo, after flying for a while, Nia Wushang whispered to her, "Do you remember the way you came?" Mo Chinga tried to recall, but she was shocked. "I can't remember clearly." The memory of cultivators was much better than that of mortals. They could easily remember an event that happened several decades ago or a person they met. Mo Chinga had never experienced this kind of situation where she couldn't clearly remember the path she had just taken. She carefully recalled. She felt she could remember everything clearly after leaving the city, but after entering the fog she could only remember a few rough turns. She couldn't remember exactly how far she flew. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chinga looked at Nia Wushang. Both of their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. There was definitely something wrong with that fog, but she didn't know whether the others had discovered it or not. At this time, City Lord May, who was flying in the front, suddenly turned around and said, "Little friends, this is Descending Star City's bewildering trace fog. Aside from being bewildering, It doesn't have any other harmful effects, so you don't need to worry. Mo Qingge and Ye Wuxiang glanced at each other. They both saw vigilance in each other's eyes. City Lord Mei was a nascent soul cultivator, one realm higher than them. He must have heard their secret voice transmission just now, so he deliberately turned around to explain. But his behavior, in the eyes of the two of them, made them even more vigilant. In a situation where City Lord Mei was present, it was actually impossible for them to communicate alone. The two of them couldn't communicate, so they could only ponder on their own. Mo Qingge calmed down and slowly pondered. She had always been used to doing things alone. Now she could just assume that Nye Wuxiang wasn't present and make her own decisions. In any case, ever since she got to know Nye Wuxiang, the two of them behaved very similarly, so presumably, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. They were now in the bewildering trace fog, and City Lord Mei was leading the way in front of them, so escaping was unwise. That being the case, she could only be patient and calmly observe the situation. In any case, aside from City Lord Mei's own subordinates, there were 15 core formation cultivators here. Presumably he wouldn't be able to deal with them as he pleased. With this thought in mind, Mo Qingge's heart calmed down a bit. She looked at Nye Wuxiang again, and the latter also gave her a meaningful glance. The two of them smiled at each other and, with a tacit understanding, continued to hurry on with their journey. The dense fog dispersed after a while. City Lord Mei was the first to stop in midair. She then said in a loud voice, "Everyone, we've arrived. This is the secret area. There's a miasma below. Please take out the wooden puppets that I've given you." Upon hearing what she said, the other cultivators took out their puppets one after another and began to wear them. Mo Qingge hesitated for a moment. She glanced at Nye Wuxiang and shook her head. She then took out the Tai Chi 8 trigrams from her Chengkuan bag and put it in her sleeve, signaling Nye Wuxiang to come closer to her. The Tai Chi 8 trigrams had the function of stabilizing yin, yang, and the 5 elements. In addition, she had already given Nye Wuxiang Cool Breeze Jade pills, so it shouldn't be a problem for her to prevent this small miasma. They didn't move for a long time. In the end, City Lord Mei still glanced at them. Fortunately, she didn't pay too much attention to them because there were also other cultivators who had other methods and didn't use those puppets. This wasn't strange at all. Which core formation cultivator didn't have a few secret techniques? Preventing miasma, such a small matter naturally wouldn't pose a problem to them. However, everyone had their own preferences, so they chose the puppets they provided without much certainty. "Everyone, are you ready? Let's go down now." City Lord Mei said, then turned into a flight light and swiftly descended. The means of a nascent soul cultivator was undoubtedly revealed. Soon after, the several Starfall City elders she brought with her also descended. Upon seeing this, the others also followed closely behind them. When everyone stopped, Mo Qingge raised her head to take a look. This place was a small canyon. The mountain wasn't steep and the terrain wasn't dangerous. The passages on both sides were very wide, and there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. The place they stopped at was a small highland above the canyon. Behind them was a slightly higher cliff, and in front of them was a slightly lower basin. There was neither devil aura nor spiritual aura in this place, so there shouldn't be any spirit veins here. The distant past era's secret place was actually in this kind of place? However, this wasn't impossible. The distant past era was different from the current era. Perhaps spirit veins had already disappeared with the vicissitudes of time. "My young friends," City Lord Mei turned around and said with a smile, "this is the secret place that I was talking about. From now on, I and several elders will use our secret technique to open the restriction. Young friends, hurry up." City Lord Mei didn't waste time and called the several Starfall City elders over. With him as the center, a total of 6 people walked down the canyon until they finally stopped in the middle of the basin. Soon after, City Lord Mei gave an order, and under his lead, a core formation cultivator used their secret technique. Immediately, 6 rays of light shone and pierced the sky. Chapter 401. When the light dispersed, a whirlwind suddenly rose inside the small canyon. This whirlwind wasn't big, so it wasn't even worth mentioning to the core formation cultivators. However, the aura coming from the whirlwind made everyone's expressions change. This was the aura of the distant past era. Although the core formation cultivators hadn't entered the distant past era secret land, they weren't ignorant people. This desolate and distant aura was definitely something left behind by the distant past era. Now, everyone believed that there was a distant past era secret land here. Mo Qingge and Nye Wuxiang glanced at each other. Both of them relaxed a bit. This aura couldn't be faked, so City Lord May's words became a bit more believable. When the whirlwind settled down a bit, a hexagram formation appeared in the center of the basin. When Emo Chinga saw it, she felt even more assured. With her attainments and formations, she could naturally see that this formation was a genuine distant past era formation. "Little friends," City Lord May said loudly, "please come here." The core formation cultivators on the plateau hesitated for a bit, but some of them stepped forward and walked down. Seeing that someone was moving, the others hesitated for a bit before they also followed. After everyone entered the basin, City Lord May said, "I found this transporting formation here. Once you enter the transporting formation, you'll be transported randomly. Therefore, little friends who have decided to move together, please enter the transporting formation together. Right, this formation can transport up to 5 people at a time. The elders should have told you about this, right?" Upon hearing what she said, more than 10 core formation cultivators moved and stood together with their companions. City Lord May swept her gaze over everyone and revealed a smile. "Alright, let's begin." For a moment, everyone was in a wait-and-see state. Everyone had a herd mentality. Very few people were willing to be the first to take the lead, even if they were cultivators. They all wanted to enter the secret land, but in the end, would there be other dangers in the secret land? This was something they couldn't be sure about. After a while, someone finally stepped forward. "Senior May, us 3 brothers will go first." It was the rather arrogant and burly cultivator from before. City Lord May smiled and said, "Little friend Jinshur is willing to go first, so there's naturally no problem. The 3 of you just need to step forward." With the burly cultivator leading the way, the 3 devil cultivators stepped onto the teleportation array. Suddenly, the teleportation array lit up, surrounding the 3 of them. The light grew brighter and brighter, and in a flash the 3 of them disappeared into the teleportation array. Emo Chinga wrinkled her brows. Judging from the technique used to set up this teleportation formation and the way it was being teleported, it should be an ancient spirit diagram. However, the teleportation speed was a little slow, and it seemed like it lacked spirit energy. Could it be that the spiritual energy supporting this secret place was running out? If that was the case, would the secret place still be complete? She looked at City Lord May and the elders of Descending Star City. Their expressions were calm and they did not seem to have noticed this problem. After thinking for a moment, she shook her head. Forget it, no matter what, the teleportation array can be activated, and the spiritual energy in this secret place should be able to last for a while, right? It was better to let the future generations worry about this problem. As he thought about this, more and more people stepped onto the transportation formation. Of the 15 core formation cultivators, only 7 remained. Aside from the 3 burly devil cultivators, most of the others moved alone or in pairs. There were very few people who moved in groups of 4. After the green-robed swordsman stepped onto the teleportation array alone, Yong Ryu said, "Fellow Taoists, should we also go?" Emo Chinga and Ye Wushang both nodded, indicating they had no objections. The 4 of them stepped onto the teleportation array together. A moment later, the light dispersed. When the 4 of them saw their surroundings, they were shocked. The cold wind whimpered around them and the messy snow blinded their eyes. They were actually in a snowstorm. Upon discovering this, Emo Chinga immediately waved her sleeves. With the help of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams, the spiritual aura fluctuated, sweeping away the cold wind and snow in the surroundings, creating a clean space around the 4 of them. Soon after, the 4 of them looked up and were even more shocked than before. As far as their eyes could see, there was a boundless ice field with no end in sight. Icebergs stood in great numbers around them and the ice was abrupt. The environment was dangerous. Standing on the ice field, the 4 of them looked like 4 little ants. In the snowstorm that filled the sky, they were so insignificant that they were almost not worth mentioning. "What's going on?" Chiu Qingrua was the first to shout while looking at Yong Ryu. Yong Ryu frowned, seemingly also uncertain. She looked at Emo Chinga and Ye Wushang. "Fellow Taoists, in your opinion this kind of topic was naturally answered by Emo Chinga. While releasing her divine sense to explore, she said, "An illusory formation." This was almost nonsense. They entered the ancient secret land through a teleportation array. Since this secret land was for the purpose of training, the unreasonable scene in front of them was naturally an illusory formation. However, the problem was that although everyone knew it was an illusory formation, they couldn't see any trace of it. "Fellow Taoist Qin, what should we do?" Nye Wushang asked. Emo Chinga didn't answer. She took out the Tai Chi 8 diagrams from her sleeve, shook her sleeve, and the Tai Chi 8 diagrams unfolded out of thin air. The Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture were dazzling. Upon seeing this picture, Yong Ruyu and Chiu Qingrua's eyes lit up. They were disciples of a big cultivation group, so their eyes didn't need to be mentioned. They could tell at a glance that this Tai Chi 8 diagrams was a top-grade magic weapon. Mo Chenga looked at the flow of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture, then closed her eyes to sense the 5 elements in yin and yang around her. After a while, she opened her eyes and said, "Yes, it's indeed an illusory formation." Seeing how certain she was, Yong Ryu looked happy and asked, "Fellow Daoist Qin, you can see it?" Mo Chenga smiled, put away the Tai Chi 8 diagrams and said, "Fellow Daoist Yong, don't have too much hope. I can indeed see that this is an illusory formation, but this formation is very clever. I have no idea how to break it." Yong Ryu waved her hand and said, "Since it's an ancient place for training, it's normal that fellow Daoist Qin can't break it in a short time. If you can figure out the key to breaking it with just a glance, then your attainments and formations would be too amazing." Mo Chenga couldn't help but smile. What Yong Ryu said was right. Even if she knew some ancient formations and even Xuanji formation books, she was a cultivator of the present, not someone from the Middle Ages. How could she break the formation in a short time? She was the one who asked too much of herself. Then what should we do now? Chiu Qingrua looked worried. "We only have 3 days. Senior Marshal Brother and I don't know much about formations, so I'm afraid we won't be able to help. What about fellow Daoist Tian Kan? Does he know anything about formations?" Nie Wuxiang shook her head silently. Chiu Qingrua sighed. "Doesn't that mean we can only rely on fellow Daoist Qin alone?" "Fellow Daoist Chiu, don't worry." Mo Chenga said calmly, "Think about it. If you were alone and entered the formation, what would you do?" Chiu Qingrua tilted his head and pondered. "Alone. I can only try using some things to break the formation. If that doesn't work, I'll try fighting on this ice field to cause spiritual aura turbulence. At that time I'll suppress the spiritual aura here and maybe I'll pass. If that doesn't work, I'll have to endure these 3 days and withdraw regretfully." "You're right." Mo Chenga said, "Although formations are used in the land of trials, they don't test the participants' attainments in formations. Therefore we'll just go through the test as usual." In this world there were not many people who were proficient in arrays, but every trial was inseparable from arrays. Therefore the true purpose of these arrays was not to trap people, but to let the trial takers experience some kind of test. If the trial taker was strong enough or had a clever mind, then they would pass and there was no need to break the array. What fellow Daoist Qin said makes sense. Yong Ryu nodded in agreement. "Junior Marshal Sister, think about the trial methods in our group. Aren't they the same? Even if this is the Middle Ages land, it can't be separated from the scope of trials, so we don't need to worry too much." Once Yong Ryu spoke, Chiu Qingrua's complexion became a lot better. The 4 of them reached a consensus. Mo Chenga waved her hand, removing the barrier she laid a moment ago. She said, "Everyone use your spiritual aura to protect yourselves. This should be one of the tests." The other 3 people also used their spiritual aura to protect themselves, blocking the wind and snow. Nie Wuxiang looked deeply at Mo Chenga with a hint of a smile in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She knew Mo Chenga removed the barrier because it was a bit strenuous for her to protect the 4 of them, not because this was a test. However, she didn't think there was anything wrong with Mo Chenga doing this. In this secret ancient land, they still didn't know the situation, so it wasn't the time to abuse their sympathy. She was also in the middle stage of the core formation realm, so she didn't need Mo Chenga's protection. As for Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingrua, if they didn't have enough strength, they didn't need to be responsible for their lives. Once everything was ready, Mo Chenga said, "Let's go. This is an illusory formation for the test. As soon as we move, it should cause spiritual aura turbulence." Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingrua nodded and followed Mo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang walking forward. The 2 martial siblings were in the early stage of the core formation realm, while Mo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang were in the middle stage, so they should be the leaders. Moreover, Mo Chenga had a spiritual treasure and was very familiar with formations, so she naturally became their leader. As the 4 of them walked forward, the spiritual aura in their surroundings began to turbulence. This turbulence became more and more intense, gradually forming a spiritual aura vortex around the 4 of them. This vortex wasn't obvious. If it were a circle, it would cover a very large area, so the other 3 people didn't feel it. However, Mo Chenga had the 8 trigrams diagram in her sleeve, which allowed her to sense the fluctuations of spiritual aura in her surroundings to a very subtle degree. If it could be said that the four of them had entered a test map when they arrived at the ice field, then the formation of this spiritual vortex was the true test. Be careful, Mo Chenga reminded them when she sensed the spiritual aura vortex was becoming more and more obvious. We've already triggered the formation, so there will be a test at any time. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua nodded cautiously, and Ye Wuxiang also had a solemn expression. This was an ancient secret land. They hadn't forgotten this point. Ancient divine abilities were mysterious, subtle, and hard to describe. They weren't something current cultivators could hope to achieve. If they were careless, they might be defeated in an instant. They agreed to Castellan May's request to enter the secret land because they wanted to experience the ancient divine abilities and comprehend their mysteries. If they were immediately defeated upon seeing the ancient divine abilities, they would lose the meaning of this trial. The wind around them grew stronger and stronger, carrying with it snowflakes that rushed towards them. Although it didn't really hurt their bodies, their eyes and ears could sense the momentum that was rushing towards them. At this time, the spiritual aura vortex had already formed. It was like a big mouth that was about to pounce on them. Chapter 402. The moment the spiritual aura vortex rushed towards them, everyone reacted differently. Nye Wuxiang, who was wearing a boxing glove, threw a punch at the ice field. With a loud bang, the snowy mist on the ice field flew up and formed a barrier around her. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua each took out a jade bracelet and intertwined them. The two jade bracelets combined into one and emitted a dazzling light from the point where they intersected, forming a powerful shield that protected the two of them tightly. As for Mo Chenga, she fumbled in her Qingquan bag and took out the white silk handkerchief. With a light wave, the white silk handkerchief turned into mist and surrounded her. Of course, these were just self-protection methods. The Middle Ages trial wouldn't let them pass so easily. After stabilizing themselves in the snowstorm, the four of them used their own methods to fight against the snowstorm that attacked them. In the beginning, although Mo Chenga was cautious, she didn't care too much because they had just entered the land of the trial. Logically speaking, this trial shouldn't be too difficult. However, not long after, she became more and more surprised. These snowstorms seemed to have intelligence. They could actually adjust the direction and strength of their attacks according to the changes in the spiritual aura around her. The Middle Ages' divine power was indeed unusual. After fighting for several breaths, they blocked the snowstorm several dozen feet away again. Mo Chenga shook her sleeves and summoned the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi. Then, she turned her wrist and summoned the heaven and earth fan. The cold wind became fiercer and fiercer. Ice chips and snowflakes hit the spiritual aura barrier around the four of them, carrying a powerful momentum. The four of them held their breath and focused, fighting against the invisible snowstorm giant. The snowstorm became fiercer and fiercer, as if there was a faint hand controlling them from behind. The four of them were able to handle it with ease in the beginning, but gradually they became flustered. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua were in the early stage of the core formation realm. Although they could defeat ordinary cultivators, they were only on par with a middle-stage core formation cultivator like Mo Chenga. As for Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang, although they weren't unable to handle it, their spiritual aura was slowly becoming chaotic. Calm your mind. Upon realizing this, Mo Chenga shouted, "We have to join hands." In any case, if they worked together and supported each other, the situation would be better than fighting alone. They wouldn't lose sight of each other. These past few days, Nye Wuxiang and Mo Chenga had developed a certain level of tacit understanding. Now, without saying a word, she immediately approached Mo Chenga. But what surprised them was that Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua also came over to them without the slightest hesitation. Mo Chenga felt a bit strange, but she also felt very relieved. When they traveled together, they were not afraid of being on guard against each other, but they were afraid of not being able to cooperate at the critical moment. Although the cultivation levels of these two people were slightly low, they were both smart people. If the two of them joined hands, they would have considerable strength. In this case, at least she and Ye Wuxiang wouldn't be a burden. The four of them met up, and the surrounding snowstorm immediately became more intense. However, everyone only needed to be in charge of one direction, so it was much easier than before. Mo Chenga unfolded the heaven and earth fan. Countless petals and branches flew out of the fan, entangling with the wind and snow in front of her. As her cultivation level increased, she gradually figured out several ways to use the heaven and earth fan. Inside the fan of heaven and earth, not only were there mountains and rivers, there were also flowers, birds, fishes, and insects. All of them could be materialized. As long as her skill was high enough, she could make them materialize and use them as fighting techniques. Seeing her method, Yong Ryu looked at her with surprise. The four of them met up. Mo Chenga had spare energy now, so when she saw his look she couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Yong, is there something wrong?" Yong Ryu shook her head. "It's nothing. It's just that fellow Taoist Qin's magic weapon is very powerful. Its control of spiritual aura has reached a subtle level. Even though cultivators from Yunzhong are famous for being good at controlling spiritual aura, it's not easy for them to reach this level. I'm just a bit surprised." She wasn't a cultivator from Yunzhong, which was what she said when they met in Sky Snow City. It wasn't strange for Yong Ryu to have such an idea. But Mo Chenga just smiled and didn't explain much. This magic weapon came from Mo Yaoqing's idea. Mo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, and she was also a genius, so she had her own way of thinking about controlling spiritual aura. After Mo Chenga refined this magic weapon according to her idea, she slowly fumbled along Mo Yaoqing's ideas, so she naturally made great progress in controlling spiritual aura. With the four of them working together, the invisible hand controlling the whirlpool of wind and snow gradually weakened. Just as the four of them breathed a sigh of relief, the snowflakes flying around them suddenly froze into ice cubes and smashed down. "Watch out!" Nie Wuxiang shouted. She then leaped into the air and punched the air with her fists. Upon seeing this, Mo Chenga's heart trembled. It wasn't only because of the ice cubes, but also because of Nie Wuxiang's strength. Her fists that struck the air were almost illusory. With the strength of her fist technique alone, she managed to block these ice cubes. Martial cultivators. So this was a martial cultivator. What formidable strength. In the past 100 years, Mo Chenga hadn't seen many martial cultivators, and she hadn't seen any who reached the core formation realm. When she followed Second Uncle and wandered about, she once saw a martial cultivator. That martial cultivator was the same as Second Uncle. He was already more than 200 years old, but he was still in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He said martial cultivators were a bit stronger than ordinary magic cultivators in fights of magical power, but it was much harder for them to make a realm breakthrough. Those who could cultivate to the core formation realm were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He cultivated painstakingly for more than 200 years. With his martial strength alone, many middle-stage cultivators were no match for him, and he could even fight against late-stage cultivators. However, he couldn't see any hope of making a realm breakthrough. He believed that if a martial cultivator advanced to the core formation realm, he would be even stronger. However, he didn't have the chance. Mo Chenga didn't know what happened to that martial cultivator. He was just a person she and Second Uncle came into contact with during their wanderings. She understood this martial cultivator's desolate and helpless feeling, but she didn't have the chance to verify his words. It wasn't until today, when she saw Nie Wuxiang attacking with all her strength, that she realized what that martial cultivator said was right. A martial cultivator who cultivated to the core formation realm was a terrifying existence. If she didn't have so many spiritual treasures, if she was just an ordinary core formation cultivator, she definitely wouldn't be Nie Wuxiang's opponent. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga glanced at Nie Wuxiang with a complicated expression. After a while she couldn't help but laugh. She didn't want to enjoy the pleasure of giving pointers to Nie Wuxiang when she befriended him. On the contrary, she hoped to have a like-minded person with whom she could discuss and advance together. She was confident that she wasn't an ordinary core formation cultivator, and she also had lofty ideals and firm confidence. That being the case, the stronger Nie Wuxiang was, wouldn't it be more motivating for her? The strength of a friend shouldn't be a pressure to hold her back, but a motivation to speed up. Why are you in a daze? If you don't help me, I'm going to die of exhaustion. Nie Wuxiang's grumbling voice reached her ears. Mo Chenga regained her train of thought and showed a faint smile. The momentum on her body suddenly became stronger, and she continuously waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers and trees knocked away the falling ice cubes. An hour later, the ice cubes gradually disappeared, and the spiritual aura in their surroundings finally returned to normal. The four of them heaved sighs of relief. Each of them found a place to sit down and began to recover their spiritual aura. According to their current situation, they should have passed this test. An ancient divine ability was an ancient divine ability after all. In this trial, every one of them was almost exhausted before they could pass. However, Mo Chenga also felt a bit strange. She always felt that although this illusory formation was brilliant, it wasn't powerful enough. Logically speaking, an ancient divine ability shouldn't only have this kind of power. However, It wasn't entirely true to say that this wasn't an ancient divine ability. She indeed sensed an ancient divine ability's aura from it, and she also sensed its profoundness and subtlety. This was too strange. Unable to think of a reason, she shook her head, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes, concentrating on recovering her spiritual aura. In any case, they were still in the middle of the trial. If they couldn't recover their spiritual aura in time, it would have a huge impact on the later trials. Just as this thought crossed her mind, she immediately realized something was wrong. Oh? How could this be? Qiu Qingrua's surprised voice reached her ears. Mo Qingge opened her eyes and stared at her. Qiu Qingrua's complexion was deathly pale. He stared at her, then turned to look at Yong Ruyu. Senior Marshal Brother, I seem to be unable to recover my spiritual aura. I tried for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase even a bit. Yong Ruyu's expression changed. He turned to look at Mo Qingge and Nye Wuxiang. Fellow Taoists, what about you? Nye Wuxiang frowned and said, You're right. I've been adjusting my breathing for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase. Upon hearing Nye Wuxiang's affirmation, Yong Ruyu's expression became somewhat complicated. He seemed to feel a bit relieved, but he also seemed more nervous. He said with a heavy voice, Me too. Right after he said that, he and the other two people looked at Mo Qingge. Being stared at by the three of them, Mo Qingge also nodded. In fact, when she was meditating just now, the spiritual aura in her body increased slightly, but it didn't mean she wasn't affected. Now that she had Yang's spiritual aura, she had a chaotic body, and her body formed a world of its own. Even if there was no external supplement, her spiritual aura could still circulate endlessly. Because of this, the spiritual aura in her body recovered a bit faster than others, and she also had a slight advantage in fights of magical power. But just now, she only felt some spiritual aura recovered because of the circulation in her body. She didn't absorb any spiritual aura from the outside at all. As everyone knew, when cultivators meditated to recover spiritual aura, they could either absorb spiritual aura from the outside to replenish it or circulate spiritual aura in their meridians during the great circulatory cycle, which could produce weak spiritual aura. However, the spiritual aura produced by the latter was extremely weak, so in most cases, cultivators absorbed spiritual aura from the outside. It was also for this reason that spirit veins played a vital role in cultivators' cultivation. But now, when they were meditating and adjusting their breathing, they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside at all. It was as if the spiritual aura in their surroundings had been silently stolen. If they were in the secular world, a place without spirit veins, this kind of situation would be very normal. However, they could clearly feel the surging spiritual aura in their surroundings. Strange. This was too strange. There was endless spiritual aura in their surroundings, but they couldn't absorb it. It was as if this spiritual aura was isolated from them. Even though they were core formation cultivators, this kind of situation still surpassed their understanding. According to common sense, this kind of situation shouldn't have happened. What went wrong in the end? Could it be that this spiritual aura couldn't be absorbed? Silence spread among the four of them. Everyone was contemplating, but none of them could figure out the reason. After a long time, Mo Qingge took a deep breath and said, We'll talk about this later. Right now we have to recover our spiritual aura. We can't delay any longer. With her reminder, the other three people seemed to wake up from a dream. They each took out medicinal pills and spirit stones. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, they could only rely on external objects. Chapter 403. 2 hours later, everyone stopped to adjust their breaths. With the help of spirit stones and medicinal pills, they had recovered their spiritual aura, but judging from the pile of spirit stone powder around them, it was obvious how many spirit stones they used. The amount of spiritual aura a core formation cultivator's meridians and dantian could hold was unimaginable for low-level cultivators. Several low-grade spirit stones could keep an aura-refining cultivator full of spiritual aura, but for core formation cultivators like them, the spiritual aura from low-grade spirit stones was basically dispensable. Only mid-grade spirit stones or higher could have an immediate effect. But mid-grade spirit stones were rare, and they were usually used to set up formations or in emergencies. Who would use them to replenish their spiritual aura? Therefore, they could only use low-grade spirit stones to replenish their spiritual aura. But even so, none of them had full spiritual aura. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, the speed of spiritual aura recovery was too slow, and they couldn't afford to waste it for a long time. Mo Chenga was the same. But her situation wasn't bad because she had a lot of restorative panaceas, and her body could still produce spiritual aura. Although it wasn't full, it wouldn't affect her strength. The formation is broken, Qiu Qingrua said happily after adjusting his breath. The power of the snowstorm gradually dissipated, and the ice field also gradually disappeared, revealing a cave. Mo Chenga smiled. Sure enough, the purpose of formations in the trial ground was just to test them. They didn't need to break the formation. But when she looked around, she became cautious again. They were currently in a cave. It wasn't accurate to say that it was a cave. To be more precise, it was a cave. It was a cave that extended in all directions and had many forks. Just where they were at, there were 3 to 5 forks. These forks were deep and serene, leading to unknown places. Fellow Daoist Qin? Nie Wuxiang asked in a low voice. "En? Is there a problem?" Mo Chenga shook her head and said, "No, but do you think it's real or fake?" Nie Wuxiang looked for a while, then shook her head. "I know nothing about formations, so I can't see through it." Fellow Daoist Qin, Yong Ryu interrupted, "I think it's real." Mo Chenga was quite interested. "What do you think, fellow Daoist Yong?" Yong Ryu smiled and said humbly, "I'm the same as Cultivator Tian, I know nothing about formations. Therefore this is only my speculation." He paused and said, "First, the terrain. I remember that when we entered the teleportation array, we were in the Jialing Mountain. This cave seems to fit the description. Secondly, the spiritual energy in the surroundings is very stable. It doesn't seem like there's an illusory formation here." Mo Chenga nodded, then said, "What fellow Daoist Yong said is correct. I also feel the same way. Since fellow Daoist Qin also thinks that it's not an illusory formation, then this scene is indeed real," Qiu Qingrua said. Mo Chenga shook her head. "Fellow Daoist Qiu thinks too highly of me. Although I know a little about formations, I don't know much about ancient divine abilities. How could I possibly miss nothing?" When Qiu Qingrua heard this, he felt that it was true. How could the cultivators of today compare to the ancient divine abilities? Even a true array master might not be able to see through an ancient illusion array. In any case, since fellow Daoist Qin can't see through it, it means it's relatively safer. Qiu Qingrua looked at the fork in the road ahead and asked, "What should we do next?" "What else can we do? Of course we keep going," Yong Ryu said. She then turned to look at Mo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang. "Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tiancan, don't you think so?" Mo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang both nodded. Looking at the situation in front of them, they indeed had no other choice but to walk down this cave and see if they could find any clues. However, Mo Chenga also felt a bit strange. That City Lord Mei said this was a trial ground and that if they passed, they'd get a lot of rewards. How did he know all this? He said he didn't pass the trial when he entered, but after they came in they passed the trial, right? She hadn't seen any notification about the trial. Mo Chenga's intuition told her that something was wrong. She must have missed something. "Fellow Taoists, let's go, shall we?" Yong Ryu called out again when she saw that Mo Chenga didn't move. Mo Chenga nodded, then followed behind them, slowly walking into one of the forks. The path they took was the one in the middle on the left. This path was chosen by Nie Wuxiang. When Qiu Qingrua asked her, she casually punched the ground, creating several cracks. The biggest one pointed to the middle, so she chose the middle path. The current situation wasn't clear, so it didn't matter which path she chose, so the other 3 didn't have any objections. As they walked, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Although Yong Ryu's cultivation level wasn't obvious, he was extremely meticulous. After Mo Chenga glanced at him, she felt reassured and let him lead the way while she continued to ponder. Since she felt she missed something, she had to start from the beginning. First, when she and Nie Wuxiang went to Starfall City to check in, Elder Liang of Starfall City came to invite them under City Lord Mei's order. Later, City Lord Mei told them about the discovery of the ancient secret place and asked them to enter the secret place to obtain the heavenly god fruit for him. Finally, he led the core formation elders under him to open the secret place and let the 15 core formation cultivators enter. After thinking about it carefully, Mo Chenga realized there wasn't any problem with the general course of events, so the problem should be with the details. Details? Which step of the details had gone wrong? Fellow Taoist Mo, what are you thinking about? Nie Wuxiang's low voice rang in Mo Chenga's ears. Mo Chenga regained her train of thought and said, I think there's something wrong with this matter." Upon hearing what he said, Nie Wuxiang cast him a glance and her eyes brightened. "You also think so?" "Also?" Mo Chenga frowned. "Could it be that I felt there was something wrong after we set off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Besides, City Lord Mei was outside, so I couldn't send you a voice transmission. Really? What do you think the problem is? Nie Wuxiang thought for a while, then said, I'm not as meticulous as you, but you know my master cultivates devil cultivation techniques, so I know more about devil path cultivators than you do. First of all, I think there's something wrong with the way they open the transporting formation. Since this is an ancient secret place, even if they used their own method to cover it with restrictions, they shouldn't have covered it directly. You should know that things left behind from ancient times usually have pure spiritual qi. Although demonic cultivators can absorb spiritual qi, they have to go through some special mental cultivation method. This way they can directly cover the demonic path restriction on the pure spiritual qi, which can counteract the restriction. Is that so? Mo Tiange indeed didn't know much about devil path cultivators, but after thinking about it, she felt something was wrong. According to what you said, there should be something wrong with that transporting formation, but I saw it. It's indeed an ancient formation. At this point, both of them felt puzzled and didn't know what to say. Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tiancan? Qiu Qingrua suddenly turned around and asked, What's wrong with you? Both of them were preoccupied with their own thoughts, so they unconsciously fell behind them. Oh, nothing. Mo Chenga quickened her steps to catch up with them. Seeing Yong Ryu's inquiring gaze, she thought about it and finally said, Fellow Taoists, you're native cultivators of Yunzhong, so you must have a good understanding of Yunzhong's situation. Is it really normal for you to invite irrelevant people to explore the ancient secret place like this? Both Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were stunned. They stopped and stared at her. Mo Chenga continued to say, Shouldn't they keep such a good place for themselves? Starfall City isn't big, so if they have this secret place to support them and train their cultivators well, it'll be very beneficial for them. Hearing this, Yong Ryu frowned and muttered, What fellow Taoist Qin said makes sense. So fellow Taoist Yong also thinks something's wrong? Yong Ryu thought for a while, then shook her head. I'm not sure. Fellow Taoist Qin, I don't know what kind of place your hometown is, but in Yunzhong there have been cases of people who discovered secret places and enjoyed them for themselves, but in the end they were discovered by big cultivation groups, leading to tragedies. Therefore, after City Lord Mei discovered the secret place, she didn't want to monopolize it, but rather took advantage of the other forces before they could react. It's not incomprehensible. So that's what happened. Mo Chenga stopped talking. In other words, she was wrong about this reason, right? But she believed in her intuition about this matter. It definitely wasn't because she was paranoid. She was sure there must be something wrong here. Fellow Taoist Qin, Nie Wuxiang suddenly said, Let's put it this way. Do you think this secret place matches the scale of an ancient secret place? Mo Chenga stared at Nie Wuxiang in surprise. Nie Wuxiang also stared at her and continued to speak in a hoarse voice, You're also a cultivator from a big cultivation group, so your knowledge is extraordinary. Do you think this place can be considered an ancient secret place? Mo Chenga was suddenly enlightened after hearing his explanation. She was right. Although there were traces of the Middle Ages everywhere, it was too simple to call it an ancient secret place. For example, the first trial they passed, the snowstorm on the ice field, indeed contained the profoundness of an ancient divine ability, but its power was too weak. It merely exhausted their spiritual aura and couldn't cause any substantial harm to them. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's expression, Nie Wuxiang showed a faint smile. Although I'm not as meticulous as you, I'm a martial cultivator, so I'm naturally sensitive to power. I dare say this isn't an ancient secret place at all. It's just a fake secret place created by applying the skin of some ancient divine ability. Once Nie Wuxiang said this, Yong Ryu's and Qiu Qingrua's expressions changed greatly. Yong Ryu stared at Nie Wuxiang for a long time before she finally asked, Fellow Taoist Tiangan, what do you mean? What else could I mean? Nie Wuxiang said faintly, Fellow Taoists, you two also have extraordinary backgrounds, so presumably your horizons aren't low either. Think about it carefully. How could an ancient trial be so easy to pass? You should know that we're core formation cultivators, so we can use magic weapons. Magic weapons from the Middle Ages had great magical powers, so how could a core formation trial be so easy? Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were speechless for a long time. After a while, Qiu Qingrua said in a low voice, Our Danxia sect also has a secret place, but Senior Martial Brother and I are only in the early stage of the core formation realm. The sect advised us to enter only after our cultivation levels are higher, but... Her gaze stopped on Nie Wuxiang's face for a while, then she said, What fellow Taoist Tianqin said is reasonable. This trial is indeed too easy. Even if we're stronger than ordinary cultivators, it's impossible for us to be unscathed. Moreover, it also exhausted our spiritual aura, Mo Tienga suddenly interrupted. She stared at the three people in front of her and said in a heavy voice, "Fellow Taoists, I'm afraid we've already entered a trap." Chapter 404. No one spoke for a long time. Nie Wuxiang's expression was very calm. She was mentally prepared. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua on the other hand looked defeated. They lowered their heads and said nothing. After a long time Yong Ruyu said in a hoarse voice, "Fellow Taoist Qin, aren't you being too presumptuous?" Mo Tienga said slowly, "First of all core formation cultivators who passed through descending Starfall City were invited to the City Lord's mansion. I remember that Elder Liang said that none of the people he invited rejected him. How unusual is this situation? How many core formation cultivators don't have powerful backgrounds? Why would everyone rush to this so-called ancient mystic land and wait here? This is the first point of doubt." Yong Ryu's expression changed for a long time. Eventually she sighed and said, "Although what fellow Taoist Qin said isn't certain, it's not unreasonable." Mo Tienga said, "You're right. It's not that City Lord may detain core formation cultivators who didn't agree, but it's more or less suspicious." "What about the second point?" Qiu Qingrua stared at her and asked. "Later we agreed to City Lord Mei's request, but he didn't want us to get to know each other at all. He even reminded us, intentionally or unintentionally, that other people might try to kill us in the secret land." "Yes," Nie Wuxiang said. "At that time I felt it was a bit strange. Although we core formation cultivators didn't know each other, wouldn't it be easier to pass if someone was willing to join hands? Even if we had a falling out in the end, it would be between us and not them. It could be said that letting us core formation cultivators get to know each other and find allies was beneficial to City Lord Mei. But he didn't. From the beginning to the end, he didn't want us to get to know each other. If fellow Taoists didn't come to visit, fellow Taoist Qin and I would probably still be companions." Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua's expressions darkened. After a moment of hesitation, Qiu Qingrua said, "In fact, before Senior Marshal Brother and I looked for allies, Elder Liang advised us to go with trustworthy people instead of temporary allies. However, after Senior Marshal Brother and I considered it, we felt it would be difficult to pass with our strength, so we didn't listen to him." Mo Tienga sighed softly. It had nothing to do with him. Wasn't he being too kind by reminding her like this? Especially when it involved the interests of Starfall City. No matter how she thought about it, she found it suspicious. The third point, however, is a lot of details. Mo Tienga continued, "The mystifying trace fog, the way they covered the secret place, the loss of spiritual aura, and so on. If the first 2 points were merely points of doubt, these details are enough to prove that this secret place isn't an ancient secret place at all." There was dead silence. No one said anything else. Everyone was silently thinking about what to do next. Since he had doubts, of course he had to go out. But how? Among them, Mo Tienga was the only one who understood formations, but it wasn't enough to break them. Besides, no matter how strong they were, they couldn't compare to nascent soul cultivators. Not good. Nie Wuxiang suddenly thought of something. Her expression changed greatly, and she took out the small wooden puppet from her Chengkuan bag. This thing. Upon seeing this thing, the other three people's expressions also changed, especially Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua. Although City Lord Mei said from the beginning that she'd prepare the things everyone needed for the trip to the secret place, giving everyone one magic weapon was too cautious. In particular, the miasma wasn't too serious, so there was simply no need to do so. Mo Tienga also took out the wooden puppet and examined it carefully. She also used her divine sense to explore it, but she found that there was a layer of barrier inside that prevented her divine sense from penetrating it. This was the method of a nascent soul cultivator. She was even more certain that there was definitely something wrong with this thing. "What should we do?" Nie Wuxiang asked her. Mo Tienga thought for a moment, then turned to ask Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua, "Fellow Taoists, it seems you two don't major in the fire element?" Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua obviously used the same cultivation technique. At that moment both of them shook their heads. Mo Tienga wasn't surprised. She threw the wooden puppet in her hand to the ground, opened a spiritual beast bag, summoned Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, burn it with fire." Xiaohua hadn't come out for a long time. Upon seeing her, it shook its head and wanted to come over to rub against her. In the end, Mo Tienga slapped it down. "I have business to attend to," Xiaohua squeaked discontentedly. Seeing that she wasn't moved, it could only obediently turn around and spit sun-real fire at the small wooden puppet on the ground. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua were a bit surprised to see Xiaohua. Spiritual beasts weren't rare, but core formation cultivators with 5th rank or higher spiritual beasts were rare. In particular, this spiritual beast didn't look ordinary at first glance because it could actually spit sun-real fire. Under the sun-real fire, the wooden puppet persisted for a long time before it finally began to melt slowly. The 4 people watched as the ordinary outer shell slowly disappeared, revealing the thing inside. It was actually a black crystal flowing with a mysterious aura. Devil crystal. Upon seeing this object, Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua simultaneously exclaimed, their faces pale. Then they untied the wooden puppet they wore on their bodies and threw it away as if it was the plague. Devil crystal? Emo Chenga stared at the 2 of them. Do the 2 of you recognize this object? Qiu Qingrua's lips trembled, but he couldn't say anything. Although Yong Ryu's expression was unsightly in any case, he still had some self-control. At this moment he reluctantly answered, there's no cultivator in Yunzhong who doesn't know about this object. Speaking of this object, we have to talk about a secret technique of Yunzhong's devil cultivators, the corpse soul technique. Once they heard this name they knew it wasn't a good thing. Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang glanced at each other then asked, what's this technique like? Yong Ryu calmed down a bit and said, this secret technique is just like its name. It's a mysterious technique that turns people into corpses while they're still alive and turns them into puppets. He stopped and took a deep breath, but he still hadn't recovered from his shock. The corpse soul technique not only takes people's lives, but it also controls their souls. It's extremely vicious. Between us cultivators, although we'll fight or even take people's lives if we don't agree, refining people into puppets like this and making them unable to reincarnate for eternity is a taboo. Therefore, although this corpse soul technique is also a strange technique, there aren't many devil cultivators who know its content, and there are even fewer who dare to use it openly. Not only us cultivators on the righteous path, but even cultivators on the devil path are also very afraid of it. When she heard that, Nye Wuxiang muttered, so this city lord may tricked us here to cast the corpse soul technique on us. It's most likely so. Cold sweat dripped down Qiu Qingrua's forehead, but he didn't wipe it off. She said, this devil crystal is an important object for casting the corpse soul technique. This object can absorb people's spiritual essence, slowly turning us into monsters that are neither human nor devil. At this point, both Mo Chenga and Ye Wuxiang's expressions changed. Will it work if we carry it with us like this? Yong Ryu nodded, then she shook her head and explained, fellow Taoists, you put this devil crystal in your Qingkuan bag just now so it's naturally useless, but my junior martial sister and I? After this object is restricted by a high-level cultivator, it'll absorb spiritual essence nearby. My junior martial sister and I have been carrying it for a long time. Then you? Yong Ryu's complexion alternated between green and white. Soon, she clenched her teeth and seemed to have made up her mind. It's not too late to realize it. We'll just lose some spiritual essence. Essence chi, in other words, was the chi of the soul. For cultivators, a person was made up of the body and the primordial spirit. They usually did not care about the soul because the soul was something that people were born with. It was there at birth and would disappear at death. It was the same for mortals and cultivators. Moreover, the soul wasn't like the primordial spirit, which couldn't be seen or touched. It wouldn't be a problem for cultivators to cultivate or fight with. Spiritual essence was the vitality of the soul. If it lost its spiritual essence, the soul would slowly solidify, lose its vitality and eventually die. However, according to Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua, there should be some kind of strange technique attached to this devil crystal, causing the person whose spiritual essence was absorbed to enter a state that was neither dead nor alive. Mo Chenga looked at the devil crystal on the ground, then looked at the other 3 puppets. These puppets were carved very meticulously, and their every movement was lifelike. However, her current state of mind was different, so when she looked at them, they looked ferocious as if they were mocking her. She thought for a moment then asked, since we've already discovered it, how can we destroy it? Yong Ryu's complexion was still pale. She said woodenly, I don't know. We only know a little about this secret technique. It's been a long time since I've heard of anyone in Yunzhong using the corpse soul technique. Let's burn it and see. Nye Wuxiang, who had been observing them, said, every devil path technique will weaken in front of a fire spell. Mo Chenga nodded. She couldn't compare to Nye Wuxiang in terms of proficiency in devil path techniques. Since she said she could try, she might as well try. She continued to order Xiaohua to burn the 3 small puppets. Soon, the 3 puppets turned into 3 pieces of devil crystal, lying quietly on the ground. After doing all this, Mo Qingge patted Xiaohua's head and rewarded it with a medicinal pill. She then asked Nie Wuxiang, "What about now?" Nie Wuxiang didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua. "Fellow Taoists, do you want these devil crystals?" Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua immediately shook their heads. They just suffered a loss and knew very little about this thing, so they didn't dare to take risks. Nie Wuxiang thought for a moment, then took out a handkerchief from her robe. She picked up the 4 devil crystals with her gloved hand, wrapped them in the handkerchief, and stuffed them into her Qingkuan bag. "Fellow Taoist Tiancan?" Mo Qingge was puzzled. Nie Wuxiang said, "If I can escape, I'll study it." Oh. Mo Qingge didn't say anything else. Nie Wuxiang had a deep relationship with the devil path, so maybe this thing would be helpful to her. "Fellow Taoists." Yong Ryu looked at them with a frown. "Since you know we've fallen into a trap, why aren't you worried at all?" They were actually still in the mood to collect devil crystals here. Mo Qingge's gaze shifted to him and she smiled. "What's the use of being worried? We still don't know what's going on with this trap. Being anxious will only mess things up." Nie Wuxiang nodded then muttered, "Our opponent is a nascent soul cultivator, there's no doubt about that. Moreover, we've also fallen into their trap and are in a passive position. Our only advantage now is that maybe they still don't know we've discovered this trap. If we can figure out their plan in time, maybe we can escape with our lives." Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua couldn't help but nod. Their 2 companions were very calm, so they gradually calmed down. "Then according to fellow Taoists, what should we do now?" Mo Qingge and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other then shifted their gazes to the 2 of them. Mo Qingge said, "I'll have to ask you. You're both Yunzhong cultivators and disciples of a big cultivation group, so you must know a lot. Think about it carefully, do you have any countermeasures?" Chapter 405. Dawning Pill Sect was one of the 5 great sects in Yunzhong. Although it was weak now, it had been passed down for tens of thousands of years and had countless disciples. Being from such a sect, Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua were both core formation cultivators, so their knowledge shouldn't be narrow. Since they knew this was the corpse soul technique, they should know some ways to deal with it. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua glanced at each other and lowered their heads in contemplation. "Senior Marshal Brother," Qiu Qingrua said hesitantly after a while, "City Lord Mei knows our identities, so why did he trick us into coming here? Not only us, but among those devil cultivators, there are also core formation experts from the 3 devil regions. How could a mere city lord like him offend them?" Yong Ryu pondered for a while then said, "This is indeed suspicious, but we did find devil crystals. City Lord Mei definitely harbors malicious intentions. But, since this matter is already in front of us, it's meaningless to deny it. We can only say that there must be some conditions that we neglected." Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua finished talking, then turned to Mo Qingge and Nie Wuxiang. "Fellow Taoists, my junior martial sister is right. According to common sense, Descending Star City is only a small devil region in the northern Qilan country. Even if he's a nascent soul cultivator, he can't afford to offend the forces behind us. Therefore, City Lord Mei must have obtained great benefits by doing this, so much that he can ignore these forces or give up on Descending Star City," Mo Qingge said with a frown. "Correct," Yong Ryu said, "I thought about it for a while and still felt something was wrong. Even if he used the corpse soul technique on all 15 core formation cultivators, it wouldn't be of much benefit to him. After being controlled by the corpse soul technique, a cultivator's cultivation level won't drop, but his strength won't be as good as before. I'm sure you 2 understand this reason." Mo Qingge and Nie Wuxiang nodded. It was obvious that there was a difference in power between a self-aware person and a puppet. Yong Ryu continued, 15 core formation puppets may sound terrifying, but they're nothing to a nascent soul cultivator. A nascent soul cultivator's strength is comparable to a core formation cultivator's. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he could fight 100 core formation puppets alone. Even an early-stage nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be afraid. Exactly. Now that Mo Qingge had confirmed it, Yong Ryu continued, "Then the question comes back to us. What kind of benefits can this city lord Mei obtain from this matter that made him disregard the consequences like this?" This time, Yong Ryu didn't wait for anyone to answer. She already said in a deep voice, "I've thought of something." The conclusion was very obvious. Yong Ryu's judgment was correct. If they obtained a supreme magic weapon or a heaven-shaking divine ability, then it was very likely that this magic weapon or divine ability could protect the core formation cultivators in Descending Star City. That was why they went all out to help City Lord Mei. But the other possibility couldn't be completely erased. After all, people were alive, and they didn't know what City Lord Mei had done. Perhaps City Lord Mei used some method to force these core formation cultivators to help him. At that time, if he obtained a profound cultivation level, even those late-stage nascent soul cultivators wouldn't be able to do anything to him. What would happen to Descending Star City have to do with him then? Compared to advancing to the late stage of nascent soul and becoming a top-notch cultivator, what was a city lord? The entire Descending Star City would be nothing more than a dispensable chess piece. At this point, Yong Ryu knocked her head with a distressed expression. But I really don't understand. How could using the corpse soul technique to create so many core formation puppets bring him so many benefits? We missed a possibility, Nie Wuxiang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said. Nie Wuxiang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, perhaps this magic crystal isn't used to cast the corpse soul technique. Hearing this, Yong Ryu was stunned. Not used to cast the corpse soul technique? Correct. Nie Wuxiang stared at him and said calmly, fellow Taoist Yong, could it be that this devil crystal can only be used to cast the corpse soul technique? Yong Ryu thought for a while, then shook his head. I don't know. Although this thing is terrifying, it's also precious. As for what it's used for, I'm also not very clear. It's just that this thing is too famous for using the corpse soul technique. Whenever I mention devil crystals, I'll immediately think of the corpse soul technique. That's right, Nie Wuxiang continued. I've done some research on the devil path, so I know some superficial things. Since this thing has the unique function of absorbing spiritual essence, it's definitely not only used for one evil technique. Moreover, some evil techniques can be invented according to this thing's characteristics. Correct? Xiao Qingrua murmured. Senior Marshal Brother, do you remember that rumor? The corpse soul technique was invented by a devil monarch with extraordinary divine power after discovering devil crystals? Yong Ryu wiped the sweat on his face. His complexion was deathly pale as he said dejectedly, this matter is becoming more and more difficult to imagine. I'm really powerless, fellow Taoist Yong? Mo Chenga stared at him with a fierce gaze. What are you saying? Don't tell me you want to give up now? Despair appeared on Yong Ryu's face. How can core formation cultivators like us fight against someone who can invent an evil technique? It's not my wish, I'm really powerless. Nie Wuxiang let out a cold umph and stared at him. We asked you to think of a way because you understand the situation in Yunzhong. We didn't ask you to bring about your own destruction. Right now, everything is just speculation, yet you want to end your own life? Raise your spirits. Otherwise, we can kill you right now to avoid you from damaging our morale. Chapter 406. Fellow Taoist Tiancan. Qiu Qingrua cried out involuntarily. She took a few steps forward, stood in front of Yong Ryu, and stared at Nie Wuxiang nervously. Nie Wuxiang was now wearing the clothes of Tiancan. She was dressed in black and looked fierce. She wasn't a kind person. She stared at Yong Ryu with a cold gaze and a stern tone. Her whole body was filled with murderous intent as if she could spill blood at any time. Mo Chenga couldn't help but smile when she saw Mo Chenga's expression. This reminded her of the first time she met Nie Wuxiang. That was during Marshal Uncle Xuanin's soul formation ceremony. At that time they were still just foundation-building cultivators, but Nie Wuxiang, because of a disagreement, attacked someone else. It was exactly this kind of imposing manner and threatening killing intent. Nevertheless, after more than 60 years, Nie Wuxiang today was a bit less gloomy compared to the past and a bit more imposing. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu. Seeing Nie Wuxiang's disdainful gaze and unyielding attitude, Qiu Qingrua turned to Mo Chenga, who she could talk to. However, when she turned her head, she saw Mo Chenga's smiling face. Her heart couldn't help but sink to the bottom. Could it be that he had chosen the wrong partner this time? This fellow Taoist Qin seems to have a good temper, but she's actually cold-blooded and doesn't care about other people's lives? Qiu Qingrua was very nervous. Mo Chenga smiled back at Qiu Qingrua as if she didn't feel anything. She then turned to Nie Wuxiang and said, I knew I'd never be able to learn your ruthlessness. Nie Wuxiang snorted, raised her eyes and said nothing. She wasn't like Mo Chenga, who tried her best to control herself from killing people. Since she was a child, she killed countless people under Master Song Feng's instruction, so she didn't care about killing people at all. To her, Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were just two strangers. It wasn't a big deal to kill them. But now isn't the time to kill them. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then looked at Yong Ryu with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yong, although I don't like killing people, I'm on fellow Taoist Tiansan's side. If you have this kind of idea, even if we don't kill you, you'll lose your life the moment you give up, in addition to your junior martial sister's life. At this point, Yong Ryu's gaze moved and she looked at Qiu Qingrua with a pale face. He saw the situation just now. Nie Wuxiang was incomparably fierce, but Qiu Qingrua stood in front of him without any hesitation. They had been martial brothers and sisters for several hundred years, and they had also become Taoist companions. They had been together for many years and he knew Qiu Qingrua's personality very well. Although her cultivation was not low, and her strength was not weak, she had been too dependent on him all these years. If she collapsed, she would definitely not be able to survive. Senior brother? Qiu Qingrua looked at him with pleading eyes. She wanted to say something but she couldn't say anything in the end. Yong Ryu sighed. Junior sister, I've disappointed you. There was confusion in Qiu Qingrua's eyes. He didn't understand what he meant. Was he regretting his actions just now, or was he apologizing for his incompetence? In the next moment, her gaze became firm. She held Yong Ryu's hand and said, no matter what you do, I'll only stand by your side. You can rest assured. Yong Ryu was shocked. Many things flashed in her eyes as she stared at Mo Tiange. In the end she sighed and said, Junior sister, you're still so affectionate towards me even at this time. That year I let you down. What's the point of saying this? Qiu Qingrua's gaze became gentle. All these years you let me control you and I stopped all the women who approached you, but you didn't complain at all. Do you think I still don't understand your feelings? It's just that I've always been unwilling. Enough, you too. Nie Wuxiang coldly interrupted their affectionate words. What kind of situation is it now? You still have time to talk about this? Quickly decide. If you want to live, cheer up and think of a way. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish right now. Yong Ryu's complexion turned pale at first. He then looked at Qiu Qingrua, then at Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang. Gradually, a determined expression appeared on his face. In the end he clenched his teeth, cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoists, I was impolite just now. Thank you for reminding me. Upon seeing his reaction, Nie Wuxiang's expression gradually softened. She withdrew her gaze and said faintly, Since you want to live, it'll be easy. Judging from her tone, it seemed she already had an idea, so Mo Tiange asked, What did you think of? Nie Wuxiang glanced at her and said, I think there are two ways to deal with this. The first is to find other people and see what happened to them. Maybe they'll have other clues. The second is to wait and see. Since Castellan May schemed against us, but we didn't follow his plan and took that puppet with us, he must have a backup plan. Mo Tiange nodded while thinking. What you said makes sense. She then turned to the other two people and asked, Fellow Taoist Yong, fellow Taoist Qiu, what do you think? Yong Ryu's face, which had just regained some color, smiled bitterly and said, Fellow Taoists, I'll leave this matter to you. If there's anything you need to know, you can ask me again. He had just experienced a state of sorrow and joy, so it really wasn't the time to think calmly. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang also understood the situation, so they didn't ask any more questions. After thinking for a while, Mo Tiange looked at Nie Wuxiang and said, The two methods you mentioned don't conflict with each other. How about we look for other people while waiting for the follow-up plan? Nie Wuxiang nodded in agreement. After a simple agreement, the four of them rested and reorganized themselves before resuming their journey. These caves extended in all directions and had many forks. In the end, the four of them simply let it be and walked casually. Nie Wuxiang was right about one thing. No matter what kind of plan Castellan May had, it would be revealed in the end. If they really couldn't figure it out, they could just wait. However, if they did that, they would be in a very passive position. Nevertheless, although they walked casually, Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang didn't let down their vigilance. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua's cultivation levels were a bit low, but the most important thing was that their will to live wasn't strong enough. Therefore, it was better for them to rely on themselves. They once again walked casually into another fork. The leader, Nie Wuxiang, suddenly stopped and raised her index finger to make a shushing gesture. The three people behind her stopped at the same time. Mo Tiange looked around but didn't see anything unusual, so she asked with her eyes. Nie Wuxiang secretly said, "There's devil aura." Mo Chenga was stunned. "How did you know?" Her divine sense was stronger than Nie Wuxiang's, but she still didn't discover it. Nie Wuxiang blinked mysteriously and said, "The magic weapon I stole from Tianyin sect can sense devil aura." "I see. Devil aura." Most of the people who entered the so-called secret ancient land with them this time were devil cultivators, so it was possible that other devil cultivators passed through here? Mo Chenga thought for a moment, then asked, "How many people? Where did they go?" "I'm not sure, but they should be coming this way," Nie Wuxiang said. "We'll just wait here." Their conversation was secretly transmitted, so Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua couldn't hear it. After waiting for a long time, Qiu Qingrua couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" Nie Wuxiang glanced at her, then said faintly, "We're waiting for someone." At that moment, Mo Chenga's divine sense also sensed traces of other people. She frowned slightly and said, "3 people. 1 is in the middle stage of the core formation realm, and 2 are in the early stage." Nie Wuxiang sighed softly and said, "Our luck's bad. It seems it's those 3 people." Among the cultivators who entered the secret area, there was only one team of 3 people. The strong devil cultivator City Lord Mei called Jin Shi and his 2 little brothers. These 3 people looked repulsive, talked frivolously, and were hostile to them. Now they were looking for other cultivators because they wanted to see what was going on and find out City Lord Mei's purpose. These 3 people really weren't good choices. Mo Chenga exclaimed in surprise. "What's wrong?" Nie Wuxiang asked. "The 3 of them are a bit abnormal." "Abnormal?" Mo Chenga furrowed her brows and said, "They seem to be being chased by something, and they look very distressed." "What?" Nie Wuxiang was surprised. At that moment, those 3 people also entered the range of her divine sense. Sure enough, it was like that. At the same time, their whereabouts were also discovered. Those 3 people suddenly sped up and ran towards them. Mo Chenga and Nie Wuxiang were focused on tracking those 3 people with their divine senses, so they didn't say anything for a while. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua's divine senses were slightly weaker, so they didn't know what was going on. As they listened to their conversation and looked at their expressions, they couldn't help but feel nervous. After a while, the 2 people's spiritual senses finally sensed the approaching group of 3, causing Yong Ryu's brows to wrinkle. After sensing for a while, he asked, "Fellow Taoists, should we wait here?" Nie Wuxiang answered carelessly. "But, who knows if those 3 people harbor evil intentions?" Yong Ryu said worriedly, "After all, before they entered the secret area, they were hostile to us." "So what?" Nie Wuxiang didn't even bat an eyelid. "If they harbor evil intentions, we'll just kill them." Upon hearing this answer, Yong Ryu shut up. After being threatened by Nie Wuxiang just now, he already knew this seemingly thin and weak fellow Taoist was much more ruthless than him. He showed his cowardice, and his cultivation level was also lower than hers, so he really didn't have the face to say anything at this time. As they talked, those 3 people got closer and closer. Finally, they heard footsteps coming from inside the cave. Mo Chenga immediately frowned. Based on the messy footsteps, their situation should be very bad. Did they encounter something terrible? She only had time to think about this when the 3 devil cultivators appeared at the end of a fork in the road. As soon as he saw the 4 of them, the strong man in the lead was overjoyed. He led his 2 younger brothers and rushed towards them. "Fellow Taoists, please help us." None of the 4 people made a sound. They clearly remembered the attitude these 3 people had before they entered the secret area. Now that they saw them, they actually came to ask for help so enthusiastically. No matter how they looked at it, it was very unusual. The 3 people stopped in front of them. The strong cultivator in the lead seemed to notice their vigilance, so he said anxiously, "Fellow Taoists, there's a monster in this cave. If you don't help us, that monster will attack you in the end." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.